You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look me better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Finds Devilmaycry in MHA. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Speckters on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The entire class, except the demon hybrid, shouted, "Too bad, that power is amazing." "Is there an echo here or what?" Alexander shouted after. Aizawa let go of Bakugo and told go back to the sidelines while the next stepped up. Midoriya walked over to the sidelines while Bakugo stood fuming with anger. That sword guy and Midoriya, those two are going to pay for making him look like an average Joe. He was going to crush them. After that, the last few tests were easily done, and the class wrapped up their first day at Iwa. Midoriya was lying on the ground catching his breath from all the tests, but then Alexander came over and without looking offered a helping hand. Midoriya accepted and Alexander pulled him up. "All right, time to give you the results. I have ranked you all from best to worst. You should probably have a good idea on where you are standing already. I'll just pull up the whole list. It's not worth going over each individual score." Aizawa explained and pressed a button on a remote he got in his hand. A hologram appeared showing everyone's ranking. To nobody's surprise, Alexander made into number 1 spot yet again. After that was Momo Yaetarazu, Shototodoroki, Katsuki Bakugo, Tenya Ida, Kikuchi, and on all the way down to the last was person, izukumidoriya. Midoriya gave up. He was done for now. Uraraka stood near him, felt sad for again. This time she could not plead to the teachers. Alexander, who stood next to him, felt a little bad for him. Same as Kikuchi and Ida. But then Aizawa made an announcement. "And I was lying, no one is going home." The entire class was silent. Looking dumbfounded was Midoriya, Uraraka, Alexander, Kikuchi, and Ida. "That was just a rational deception, to make sure you gave it your all in the tests," Aizawa explained. Which caused 4 out of the 5 to yelled in utter confusion. "Huh? Are you kidding me?" Kikuchi yelled right after. While Kikuchi was yelling, Alexander began laughing little by little. "This Aizawa guy was huge troll. I am surprised to learn the rest of you didn't figure that out. I am sorry, I guess I should have said something," the woman named Yaetarazu said. Her quirk allowed her to create anything non-organic from her body, if she knew how it was built up in molecular level. Everyone else in the class was giving her the wired eyes. Yes, she should have told them. The guy named Hantosiro. His quirk was tape elbows and his face looked like it was permanent smiling, said. "That was pretty nerve-wracking, huh?" to the guy behind him who just so happened to be the guy with spiky red hair. "Nah, I am always down for a challenge," he said. He was Kirishima. His quirk made able to harden his skin. I am going to have to remember that, Alexander thought, but he was not being serious. "That's it, we are done for the day. Pick up a syllabus in the classroom, read it over before tomorrow morning," Aizawa said and left the students. But before he left, he walked over to Midoriya. "Midoriya, take this and go have the old lady fix you up," Aizawa said and handed him a piece of paper. "Things are going to be tougher tomorrow when your actual training begins." There was much Midoriya completely failed at, so, in his mind, he would have to start from the bottom. He still had a whole lot to learn if he was going to achieve his dream of becoming a pro hero. Later, Midoriya walked out of the school doors and headed for the exit. It had been a long day and Recovery Girl's power had drained his energy. Honestly, the only thing he wanted right now was to sit down his couch back home. He then suddenly felt a hand on his shoulder. Ida placed his hand on shoulder, which caused the messy hair boy to turn around and notice it Ida and Alexander not too far behind. He was a little startled like always. "Oh hey there, Ida." "Alexander." "How is the broken finger doing?" Ida asked. "That thing was like a burnt chicken," Alexander said. Midoriya lifted up his index finger to show them. "Oh, it's all fine thanks to Recovery Girl," he said as he thought back to how the nurse kissed him to heal his broken finger. Midoriya knew he could not continue to rely on others. He needed to turn the problem around soon. "Did she kiss you anywhere else, eh?" Alexander joked. Midoriya became horrid with discomfort. "What I know I." Alexander chuckled. Hee, dude, relax, I am joking." "Ida, you want to go over the stuff we talked about before with Midoriya?" Alexander asked. "Oh yes," Ida said, and all three of them began walking over to the UA gate. "I was a bit concerned by Mr. Aizawa's approach to the class, but I trust the school's judgment. UA is the top program," Ida was saying. "Even so, lying is downright immoral." It was then Midoriya thought he had gained enough info about both of them. Originally, Midoriya thought that Ida was nothing more than a scary individual, but now he understood that he was just serious about school and all. Alexander had assisted with moral support in his own way and had given him a hand a couple of times. He was a good guy in his eyes, if not also kind of a joker. The three were then interrupted when two voices yelled for them. "Wait up, you guys." They turned to see the girl with brown hair, Uraraka, and the other girl with white hair, Kikuchi. Uraraka spoke first when they arrived. "Are you going to the station? I'll join you." "I have to take a bus at point near the station, so can I follow along too?" Kikuchi asked. "Oh, you are the Infinity Girl and Kikuchi," Ida said as they came. "Sorry, I should introduce myself already. I am Ochako Uraraka." She introduced herself and looked her side. "I know your name is Kikuchi." Kikuchi replied with a nod, and Uraraka looked forward and started saying the names of the three boys in front of her. "Let's see, you are Tenya Ida. You are Cowlsick and your name is Deku, right?" Midoriya was slightly taken back by hearing his nickname coming from her. "Deku?" Kikuchi became confused. "Huh? You told me your name is Izukumidoriya," she then said to Midoriya. "Huh? Wait, didn't that guy Bakugo call you Deku? During the fitness test he said, 'Deku you bastard,' right?" Uraraka said. "Yeah, what's up with that?" Alexander asked, also a little confused. "Well, it is. My name is actually Izuku. Deku is what Kachin calls me to make fun of me," Midoriya clarified. "That sounds unsportsmanlike," Ida commented. "What he said," Alexander agreed. Uraraka apologized. "Oh, I didn't realize that. I am sorry. You know what? I like Deku. I think it would make a great hero name. Plus, I think it sounds kind of cute." Midoriya's cheeks turned red at her remark. "Deku it is," he shouted. Just like that, Ida and Kikuchi raised their voices in confusion. "Weren't you saying it was an insult?" Ida asked while sweating. "Are you really going to accept it like that?" Alexander asked. Granted, he had been called many things over the years. Midoriya turned around and covered his face with his hands, then he said some gibberish none of them could hear. But it was obvious he still had red cheeks of embarrassment. "Oh yeah, Alexander, you did amazing out there today, scoring top spot and all," Uraraka said. "I forgot to commend you as well. First the entrance exam, and now the quirk assessment test. Above average score in every test we faced so far," Ida said. Alexander just casually nodded. "Yeah, I am great. And it's Alexander Cowlsick, by the way," he explained. Kikuchi then turned to Midoriya. "Oh yeah, I also have something to say. I generally thought you were going to fail the test and get expelled. Sorry about that. But hey, you proved me wrong," she apologized. The not used to talk to girls Midoriya responded. "Oh, it's fine. I was really on the ropes there," he said while shaking. Uraraka changed the subject back. "So, most of us are headed for the station, right? We should all do this tomorrow too." "Sure, I am a Midoriya's neighbor anyway," Alexander said and began walking, and the rest followed suit. "That's pretty neat," Kikuchi said. "And perhaps tomorrow we can have subtler class sessions," Ida said. The five of them then left school grounds and headed for the train station to go home from their first day at UA and first day on the path to become pros. Later at the apartment building where Izuku and Alexander lived. They came walking up the stairs up the floor where each had their home. "Guess I see you tomorrow, Alexander," Midoriya said, saying his goodbye. Later, Alexander also said his goodbye. Alexander unlocked the door to his home and walked and locked it again behind him. He then immediately took off his school uniform and into something he was a little comfortable with. a t-shirt and black pants. He then sat down in his couch and turned on the TV where he just sat for hours until he finally fell asleep. Somewhere completely else, nighttime. A person was standing over the corpses of dozens slain enemies. All were of demonic origin. It was inside of some kind of Eastern temple. However, it looked like it had been wrecked by a large indoor fight, with broken pillars and debris scattered around on the floor. The person was holding a sword. Its style was ancient Chinese, a black handle dotted with ornate imagery attached to a shining steel-white blade. The person sheathed the sword into its equally ornate scabbard and held up one hand to one ear. "It's me," the person said, with a female voice, talking to someone on a headset radio. No, they did not know anything. But since you are the only one who has actually tried researching for me, I'll work with you for now. It was silent for a moment. The demon corpses on the ground began disintegrating into dust. The person spoke again into the radio. "Just so you know, the moment you are unable to help me in my search, I'll have no further use of you and leave. And if you think of betraying me, then you are in for a world of hurt. And you should know by now that is a vast understatement, even for someone like yourself." She threatened to the person on the other side of the radio call. "Good, then we agree. I'll head back now. Hear from you soon. All for one." Next day at school. The class that Alexander and Midoriya were in was learning normal school-related subjects such as English, which most in the class found dull. Luckily, the school cafeteria had great food for cheap prices made by the famous hero Lunch Rush, the cooking hero. But with 1A, they had history class after English. So with that, the lone berserker managed to secure enough time for his fellow warriors to regroup and mount a defense against the English soldiers. Though they failed, the lone berserker showed absolute courage and true sacrifice for his kin. Aizawa said. The class was going over different types heroes and deeds, learning about the different types heroisms. Alexander, who was sitting in back along with Kikuchi as the 21st and 22th student, was actually trying this time to follow along in the history book they were given. Though he understood and talked Japanese well enough, the written language was something completely different. He did know both the Cyrillic and the English one, but Japanese was downright annoying to learn. Seriously, 3 different alphabets for one language. Bakugo, who was sitting one seat up from Midoriya, was getting extremely bored with the history session. So far they had heard 3 boring people who were supposed to be heroes centuries back. Finally he had enough and just raised his tone and voiced his opinion. "Aha, this is dumb." Bakugo's rage startled some of the students, as they were either half asleep also or in fact were listening carefully to what Mr. Aizawa was telling. Mr. Aizawa said with a passive look to the explosive boy, "Bakugo, I hope what you have to say is educational." Bakugo spoke again. "Teach, these stories are boring. None of these heroes had any quirks and are supposed to be real-life heroes." Kikuchi then also voiced her opinion. "Mr. Aizawa, I kind of agree with Bakugo, though obviously for different reasons. None of these people really are what we call heroes today." The red spiky-haired Kirishima also said something I have to agree to. Most of these people never really saved anyone by not killing anyone or losing their life in the process. Not to mention a very few of them even went on to do terrible things, like that cow guy, who ended up killing civilians and was corrupt. And yet he was still called Hero of Chaos. Asui the frog girl said with no real emotion in her face, but maybe that was mostly due to her quirk making her look more frog-like than her personality. The class then unexpectedly went into somewhat of a chat room, as nearly everyone, besides Midoriya, Alexander and Ida, started talking across the class, as they also stated their lack of willingness to hear more from history class. Mr. Aizawa eventually got tired of his students not focusing and said in a raised yet calm and demanding voice, "Silence." Everyone immediately stopped talking and regained their attention on their teacher. "Look." Mr. Aizawa started talking again. "I know why you can find this a little uninteresting. However, it's important for all of you to know about these heroes so you don't maybe make the same mistakes they made, and also learn what you can do to replicate their good parts and use it yourself to become pros. That's the reason we have these history classes. Learn the good and the bad." The students of class 1 then stopped talking and reluctantly picked up their books again. Aizawa read the expression on their faces. It seems that did not satisfy any of you, he sighed. All right, perhaps this will change your minds a bit. All the students raised an eyebrow when he said that. Everyone turned to page 99. All the students then did so and saw a not a paratactically long page, but it did have a painting on the next page that filled all the way out to the corners. The picture was old and showed of some kind of humanoid creature man, armored in dark fantasy style, mixed in with clothing of an elegant and vampiric count lord. The head resembled that of a twisted bat with red eyes, and the creature also held a big claymore in its right long nailed hand to its side. Behind the weird and almost scary-looking creature was a large tower that was depicted as reaching up to a half-moon in the night sky. All the students wondered just why such a thing was placed in their history book of heroes. Alexander's heart almost skipped a beat once he saw the creature. He believed he knew just what the painting was supposed to represent. But it couldn't be, could it? Mr. Aizawa spoke again. This is more myth than actually history. However, I think it just might change a few minds about the history of heroes. He then looked down to the green-haired boy, Midoriya. Why, yes, Midoriya stammered. Please stand up and read the text out loud for the rest of the class, Mr. Aizawa told him. Why, yes, Mr. Aizawa, Midoriya said and rose up from his chair. He then held the book in front of him and began reading out loud for the class. Centuries ago, the world was in relative peace. But one day, without any warning, demonic forces of the abyss came on a merciless rampage of death and sparked war between the human world and the other, the underworld. All the students suddenly took huge interest and listened on. But in humankind's darkest hour, somebody from the underworld woke up to justice and stood up against this legion, alone. Even though the words were few, some student felt like they were hearing some type sacred and forbidden text. His name was Kain. Kain used his unmatched swordsmanship and unholy arcane arts to defeat the other lords of the underworld, and finally closed the gate that was leaking in the terrors. The atmosphere in the classroom became more and more ominous with each passing millisecond. Later he quietly reigned the human world and continued to preserve harmony for as long as he could. Legend says he still guards the gate between worlds to this day. He had become a legend. The legendary Dark Lord Kain. The classroom was quiet. The students had goosebumps and their necks standing up from the story that Midoriya had just read out loud. A benevolent demon hero? Whoa. This guy managed to defeat an entire army of demons by himself, Kaminari, and young man with a lightning quirk said. A demon that saved the world, Iarazu continued. And he then ruled the world in peace? That seems a lit far-fetched if you ask me. Osido, the pink girl with an acid quirk said. Legendary Dark Lord. That's quite the title, Zero, the guy with the tape elbow quirk said. Even Midoriya was impressed by the strange tale. That's something he never thought he would hear. Meanwhile, the other students were quite excited to hear about this epic myth. Alexander stared at the painting. He formed a small smile, not like his usual that was tied with his overconfidence. No, this was one of happiness instead. The Dark Lord Kain, that was his father. The demon who turned on his own kind and become a legend. Vague flashes of his past quickly crossed his mind and remember back to a moment long ago where he had a conversation with his father as a child. He didn't remember what the conversation was about, but that didn't matter much. He remembered fondly when his father rubbed his hair after they talked. Alexander's mood turned a little sour afterwards. Sometime later after the memory, his father Kain was killed, so the book is wrong unfortunately. He had no idea how, but he could guess that it was done by a really powerful demon. He only heard that his father was killed from his mother, and she never told him any details, only that he was gone. It was then shortly after that his home was attacked and his mother was killed along with her. The moment he was the only one left of his family, he developed the mentality for killing demons as a form of revenge. It was something that drove him immensely. Meanwhile, Kikuchi, who was sitting next to him, noticed that the young man was giving the painting quite the glare. Something wrong, Kawalksik? She asked. The young demon hunter snapped out of his thoughts. Huh? Oh, nothing. He casually waved her off, as nothing happened. Also, meanwhile, some of the students still talked about the myth. This guy kind of sounds like a medieval All Might, doesn't he just a little? Uraraka remarked. If All Might was a supernatural being and from a supernatural underworld, then yes, He almost is, Ida said. Hey, Mr. Azawa. Sato, a guy with a sugar quirk that made him stronger, but also less intelligent, asked. The texts say he closed the gate between worlds. Do you have any idea what that is, or how? Azawa responded. No clue. From what I do know that is not covered in the book is that apparently Kain is still being seen by many as a savior today, real or not. Some even worship him as a god or at least a saint, but mostly in Eastern Europe. They worship a demon as a god, Gyro asked. Wasn't that technically heresy in a shape or form? A very few also view heroes like All Might as gods, and since Kain is a very old legend, it's more or less tradition for many. Mr. Azawa explained. But what I want you all to consider from Kain's story is no matter a person's origin, one can still become a hero. In this case, a demon becoming mankind's savior. Remember to always be open-minded. The class took a moment on their own to ponder about what he told them, but then went on to the break as the school bell rang. Bakugo was still a little annoyed. It was just an old tale that sounded like dung to him. Alexander was little glad, because he remembered a good memory, even if it was just for a short moment. Then later in the afternoon, it was finally time for hero basic training. The students were sitting in class waiting patiently for their teacher for the session, when just then someone was talking loudly outside the classroom. I am here, the door opened. Coming through the door, like a hero, All Might said, coming into the classroom. All the students were gasping in awe at the appearance of the #1 hero. Excitement swept the air inside the classroom. Whoa, I can't believe it's really All Might, Kaminari, a student with an electricity quirk. So, he is a teacher here. This year is going to be totally awesome, Kirishima said. Is he wearing his Silver Age costume? The frog girl Tsuyu Asui observed. I am getting goosebumps, it's so retro, Majiro said, the guy with the tail quirk. All Might stood in front of the class and began speaking. Welcome to the most important class in UAHI, he said. Think of it as Heroing 101. Here you will learn the basics of being a pro, and what it means to fight in the name of good. Let's get into it. Today's lesson will pull no punches, he said as he held up a card that read Battle. Bakugo was pretty stoked. Now he had a chance to beat Midoriya senselessly. Alexander, the other hand, was not as enthusiastic as everyone else since he needed to have a real high-powered opponent in order to have real fun. It had been a long while now since he had one of those. Just maybe one of his classmates could be a real challenge, but he did not have too high hopes. All Might continued. But one of the keys of being a hero in this is looking good, he said, and pointed to the wall where automatic shelves came out that held the hero outfits that were made for the student by their own design and based on what they scored in the exam. The class was then told to meet All Might at Battle Center B, where Midoriya, Alexander, and the 2 others had their entrance exam. At the Battle Center, All Might stood waiting for the young heroes. When they came, they were all dressed in their hero outfits. They say clothes makes the pros young ladies and gentlemen, and behold, you are the proof. While the rest wore extravagant hero outfits and Alexander walked in wearing the exact same gray and red demon hunter coat he wore to the entrance exam and used for demon hunting. He saw no need to have an outfit when he was asked to make one for the hero course, so called in and said that he would bring oneself. He even had his sword with this time. But still no guns were currently not on him, they were at home. Now, shall we get started? You bunch of newbies, All Might asked. Midoriya then arrived with his costume that looked like a raging green rabbit. Alexander thought at first glance. Alexander chuckled. So, what is this? Are you the green hair of justice or something? He teased. Midoriya took it well. Well, no, he said, rubbing the back of his head. Let's just say it was gift. It meant more since his own mother went out of her way to help him get a costume ready for today. Uraraka noticed Midoriya and Alexander and walked over to him. Her outfit looked like an astronaut suit with a big visor and all. Oh Midoriya, love your costume. Not too flashy, you know. Midoriya's cheeks went red again when he saw how tight Uraraka's costume was. I should have been more specific of what I wanted. This bodysuit is skin tight, not really my style. Then from out the corner, Kikuchi walked over to them wearing her own costume. Hey guys, how do I look? She asked. Kikuchi wore a tight dark purple, normal purple and gray outfit that covered most of her body and 4 small white belts around her waist. Her arms and legs were exposed from elbow to hands and knees to just a little above the foot. She wore white tennis shoes on her feet and sported stylish purple sunglasses and a scarf around her neck. My forearms and forelegs are not covered so I can create crystals. Or else I would just make holes in them all the time. I like it. You look really cool and totally hip, Uraraka said. The sunglasses suit you nicely. It kind makes me want to get some. Though I don't think they would match my costume, Midoriya admitted. Alexander took a quick walk around her to see the whole costume. Asterisk whistle asterisk, now that's what I call dope. Looking good, he commented while holding his chin and the hand on his waist. Kikuchi was a tiny bit embarrassed, but she managed not blush. She then noticed the sword Alexander had on his back. Hey, is that the sword I heard you use? Can I see it? Sure. Alexander responded and showed off his sword, uprising, to Kikuchi and Uraraka. Midoriya had already seen it, but still it was a cool choice of weapon. They all gazed at the sword like it was a piece of expensive jewelry. Can I touch it? Uraraka asked, not taking her eye off the well-made sword. Nope, Alexander said and placed back on his back, much to Kikuchi and Uraraka's disappointment. All Might noticed the way Midoriya was dressed, and it was an obvious homage to his own persona. You are so obvious. All Might whispered and then spoke out loud. Now that you are ready, it's time for combat training. Ida was inside some kind of car armor night outfit and raised a hand to ask a question. Sir, this is the fake city from our entrance exam. Does that mean we will conducting urban battles again? Not quite. I am going to move you 2 steps ahead. All Might said, and they explained that most fight they would get into would probably be out in the open. However, sometimes you would to go fight indoors. Backroom deals, home invasions, secret underground lairs. Smarter villains stay hidden and out of sight. So, in the training he had prepared, they were going to fight each other 2-on-2. All the students had their own worries for all of those things, and how it would affect them personally since many hadn't done something like this before, but still the excitement for actually getting to do it pressed down the worries. It reminded Alexander of his first day as a demon hunter. He almost got killed that day too. However, All Might simply moved on to talk about the details on the trial. A hero team and a villain team would go up against one another. The villains had hidden a nuclear missile somewhere in the building and the hero team had to go in and stop them. Win conditions was if the heroes got the bomb or captured the heroes they won, and if the timer ran out or the villains captured heroes the villains won. Both teams would have to use coordination in order to succeed. Since it was realistic for heroes randomly join up with each other, it made sense to draw lots on who went with who. Team A was Midoriya and Uraraka. Team B was Shoji and Todoroki. The latter had a combined quirk of fire and ice, which was rare. Team C was Yayurazu and Mainta. Minate's quirk was throwing sticky ball so that his enemies would get stuck if they touched them. Team D was Ida and Bakugo. Very unhealthy for them both. Team E was Osido with the acid slim she could produce and Aoyama with the naval laser. Team F was Rikido Sato with a quirk called Sugar Rush that made him strong if he shallowed sugar, and Koda, who looked like a rock, had the ability to talk to animals. Team G was Kaminari and a girl named Gyro who could use earplugs or something. Alexander didn't have time memorize all the quirks yet. Team H was Takoyami, who had a crow head and a shadow quirk he could manifest to attack with. He was paired up with Isui the frog girl. Team I had a Jiro with the tail and a girl that was totally invisible to the naked eye, Hagakure. It also meant she was in fact naked all the time, since she was, well, invisible. Still, it was awkward to be in a class with a nudist. The last team, J, had the red-haired Kirishima and the guy with elbow tape Zero. However, due there being one too many students in the class, Alexander and Kikuchi was asked to stay on the sideline for now, as they would get a one-on-one as the last two. I declare the first teams to fight will be, All Might said, waiting for a fake drumroll. He then quickly held 2 round ball-up letters on them. These guys, he shouted, showing the letters D and A. Midoriya's team the heroes and Bakugo's team the villains. Everyone else had to go to the monitor room to watch. Bakugo shot glares at Midoriya, who in turn surprised him with a glare back. For this exercise, Bakugo and Ida had to act as real villains in order to make it realistic as possible. But if things went too far, All Might would step in and call off the fight then and there. At the floor with the bomb, Ida and Bakugo were securing their surroundings. The room was nothing to really talk about except white painted wall, tiled floor, and a few pillars holding up the room, maybe some barrels and other stuff. Even though this is training, but it pains me to align with criminal behavior, Ida said as he examined the fake explosive bomb in the middle of the room. So, this is the weapon we must protect. He knocked on it for fun. Fake, of course. Hey, Bakugo said, and Ida turned around. Do you really think Deku has a quirk? He asked. You saw how he threw that ball. Thought I think his power hurts his body, Ida said to the blonde boy. Ida went on to say some more, but Bakugo was not listening to him. He angry. Very angry. Angry that Alexander managed to score higher than him. He was angry he was not the best in the apprehension test. But most importantly, he was angry at Midoriya. Was Midoriya really holding back all the time he had known him? Had been tricking all these years, making him look like a fool? He was going to roast him for it. Outside, Midoriya and Uraraka was getting ready to move into the building, reading the layout they gotten on a piece of paper. You think they going expect us to remember this building's floor plan? It's so big. She looked up from her paper. You know, All Might is just as cool in person as he is on TV. I am glad this exercise was not a punishment like Mr. Aizawa's. She then wide-eyed looked at Midoriya, who was this pointing like pig. You are sweating through your clothes. Well, just because we are up against Kachin, he stammered in discouraged tone. Plus there is Ida too. We should be on our guard. Who knows what they'll pull. Luckily for him, Uraraka was going to support him in this endeavor. Meanwhile, within the monitor room, All Might suddenly shouted through the mic. All right, let's begin the indoor combat training. Team A and Team D, your time starts now. The monitor room was dark and was lit with low light coming from a big green screen displaying several cameras scattered around the building where the two teams were getting started. Alexander stood and waited to see just how chaotic this was going to get. Midoriya and Uraraka had made inside by crawling through a window. The building's layout was filled with narrow spaces and the walls were just gray metal plates, all the way making the atmosphere dark and unpleasant for the two. Midoriya thought that since his quirk could burn him out fast, he would have to rely on his brain for this mission instead. And furthermore, thanks to his hero notebook he had made himself, he had the concept on indoor battles down. So now was the perfect time for him to put it into practice. However, to his surprise, Bakugo suddenly jumped out from the corner, looking really PSS. Bakugo threw a punch at Midoriya, who just narrowly dodged it with Uraraka. Bakugo wore grenade gauntlets along with his black and red hero outfit. They were made by Yu, so he could now make more powerful explosions. The reason how was the gauntlets were made so they gathered sweat better, since that's where his explosions came from. His sweat was like nitroglycerin. Uraraka, are you okay? Midoriya asked. I am fine, thanks, Uraraka said, and then she noticed how Midoriya's mask was torn. Deku, It's just my mask. I am fine, Midoriya assured her while looking ahead at Bakugo. Bakugo waved away the smoke with his grenade gauntlet to face Midoriya. What's the matter, Deku? Afraid to stand up and fight me? He taunted in anger. I knew you would come at me first, Midoriya said. I figured you'd try and catch me by surprise. Back in the monitor room. He almost got the jump on him, Minta said. Sneak attack, Bakugo, Kirishima said in frustration. What kind of man pulls cheap CRP like that? Nah, Bakugo is just acting out his role as a villain, Alexander commented. Yes, good eye, young Kawoksik. It's a viable strategy. He is playing the part, All Might said, agreeing with Secret the hybrid. But it didn't work. Midoriya dodged him, the pink girl Ashido said with a cheerful tone. Wait, there he goes again, Kaminari said. Bakugo threw another punch at Midoriya. I won't hurt you so bad they'll have to stop the fight, Bakugo threatened, but Midoriya didn't get scared. Instead, the messy-haired boy grabbed his gauntlet, surprising him. Him and Uraraka, who was cheering Midoriya on. Wow, look at those moves. Midoriya had gotten an excellent grip on Bakugo and then proceeded to throw him over his shoulder, making Bakugo slam into the ground back first. The slam hurt Bakugo and he grunted in pain. Impossible. How is he this good? He thought as he lay on the ground. Catchin, Midoriya said. You always use a big right hook to start a fight. I know because I watched you for years. Midoriya informed him. I have analyzed very amazing hero, even you. I wanted to learn everything I could about them. It was all in the notebook you burned and threw away. This angered the blonde explosive boy further. Midoriya continued. You can call me Deku. But I am not the same helpless defenseless kid anymore. You hear me? Midoriya then yelled out from the top of his lungs. From now on, Deku is the name of a hero. In the monitor room, Alexander stood forming a small smile on his face. He was a little inspired on how Midoriya stood up to his bully. That's right, Midoriya, give him hell, Alexander thought. Probably the reason why Alexander was rooting for Midoriya was that he was curious to see how far the green-haired kid could go with a quirk that messes up the user's body. Perhaps that's why he was being friendly with Midoriya. He was interested to see how green hair would handle things. Bakugo stood up again. You are shaking in your boots. You are so scared, yet you want to fight me anyway. That's why I hate you, he shouted in rage. Meanwhile, upstairs. Bakugo, come in, get me a status report. Ida yelled into his headset to get in touch with his partner. Bakugo, where are you? Bakugo came in over the headset. Just shut up and defend the weapon. I got more important things to worry about. Are you forgetting what our mission is? Ida said to Bakugo. But he hung up. Hello? He hung up on me, he said out loud. This isn't the time for radio silence. They were supposed to be partners, he thought, irritated at the blonde explosive boy. Meanwhile, in the monitor room. Hey, who is Bakugo talking to? I am not hearing anything. Could we get any sound with this video? Kirishima said. All Might explained. He's got a radio in his ear so he can talk to his partner. I gave it to him before the match started, along with a map of the building. Also, this, he said and pulled up a small of tape. Capture tape. Wrapping this around your opponent means that you apprehended them and they're out for the rest of the game. We'll get some sound later. So, there is a 15-minute time limit, and the good guys have no idea what floor the nuclear weapon is hidden on, right? Correct, All Might responded. Then the heroes are clearly at a disadvantage here, a big one, Ashido said, thinking it was too unfair of a test. PHFF, as if villains don't play fair. Alexander stated while cross-armed looking at the fight, causing the people in the room to stare at him. Bad guys do whatever they can to succeed, so it should be no different here. Correct again, young Kowalczyk. All Might said, giving him the thumbs up. Real pros have to outwit villains on a daily basis. That's life. Even when the odds aren't in our favor, we fight, he said, making the field pumped. All together, All Might rallied them for a cry. Let's hear a plus ultra, everyone except Alexander shouted. He was too busy looking at the screen to really care that much. All Might noticed how focused Alexander was on the battle on the screen rather than wanting to participate in the rally cry. Either that or he didn't care at all. So, this was the transfer student that was recommended, All Might thought. From what he knew, Yu was not too interested in him when they saw his grades, but the school in Moscow Alexander went to deeply insisted that he had to come. Yu reluctantly agreed by having him go through the regular entrance exam. He was there when he saw Alexander take down all the enemies before him. Good thing Yu had him come anyway. It would have been a total waste for them to have missed up on getting such a skillful student. Come to think of it, Yu got the proposal for Alexander all the way back in winter. He would have had plenty of time to get higher grades, so he could have gotten better recommended. It was a little odd. All Might then decided it was better left for another time. Monsieur, Aoyama said, one of the students in the class who also wore armor, but a bit more flamboyant, he is on the move. The video feed then showed Midoriya yelling to Uraraka to leave while Bakugo was too concentrated on him. Meanwhile, Bakugo was chasing Midoriya. Uraraka had reached the room where Ida and the bomb was. Ida was strangely enough talking out loud to himself. Bakugo diffidently has a villainous side, he said. And that's exactly what we need to succeed. I need to temporarily devote myself to criminal intent. Yes, I won't fail this trail and bring shame on my family name. And in a wired sense of logic, he said, I must now embrace evil in order to become a hero. Ida changed his voice to sound more sinister. Behold, I am the personification of villainy. Bawahahaha, he laughed. Nearby Uraraka was about to burst with laughter herself after seeing Ida's acting. He's so serious it's funny. However, Ida heard her. Uraraka, is that you? Still keeping up his acting. Now busted, Uraraka emerged from her cover and revealed herself in embarrassment. I knew you would come here alone, the instant that Bakugo ran off by himself and engaged with Midoriya. Your quirk allows you to float anything that you touch. But I have prepared for that. He then waved with his hand to show he had removed everything she could have used as a weapon. You have nothing to use against me, do-gooder. My tricks have rendered you helpless, he pointed at her. Uraraka was now a little concerned over how serious Ida took the roleplay. With Midoriya. He was hiding from Bakugo when Uraraka contacted him and told him about the villainous Tenya Ida. But he was interrupted. Bakugo suddenly appeared behind him a few meters away. Midoriya did have a plan, though he could the capture tape he got from All Might. Then Bakugo would be disqualified. But Bakugo was about to give a scare. I am all loaded up, he said. What does that mean? Midoriya asked, slightly worried. He didn't answer. Why aren't you using fancy quirk? He said instead. His eyes become even more psycho-looking. Don't tell me you are underestimating me, Deku. Get over her and show me what you are made of. Midoriya tightened the tape in his hands and told Bakugo, I am scared of you anymore, Kachin. It made Bakugo twist his face in anger yet again. But it then turned into a sinister smile. Since you are such a stalker by now, you probably know how my quirk, explosion, works. Nitroglycerin-like sweat that form from my hand, and then I blow it up. Imaging what I can do if I had a lot of it, he said as he loaded the big trigger on the grenade gauntlet. These gauntlets aren't just for show. They have been storing up my sweat for one monster blast. He is going too far, All Might thought. Young Bakugo, don't do it. You'll kill him, All Might ordered, but to no avail. He'll be fine as long as he dodges, Bakugo madly yelled back over the headset to All Might and then fired off a big blast from his gauntlet. Midoriya managed to dodge just in the nick of time, but the blast was so powerful created a big hole in the building and made the ground shake violently so even those in the monitor room could feel it. This is nuts, Kirishima said, surprised by the shock from the explosion. The hell? Is Bakugo this much of a sore loser? Alexander thought. Back at the building, All Might's voice came in over the radio. Come in, young Midoriya, Midoriya heard as he came in over the radio. Is that even allowed? He asked himself the most important question of the day. Midoriya then saw Bakugo walk out of the smoke towards him. Go ahead. He laughed mischievously. Use your stupid quirk on me, Deku. Glow from the fire that the explosion made illuminated his face like the fires of hell. You will never beat me, he said. Bakugo, what your status? What was that explosion just now? Ida yelled over the mic, forgetting about the girl Uraraka. So, she in turn took the opportunity to try and get hold of the bomb. If she did, then her and Midoriya would win. But Ida realized what she was about to do, and he tried to grab her. But Uraraka made herself fly over him to then get the bomb. Since can she make herself float? Ida thought, and quickly used his quick engine to speed up and intercept her. He managed to pull it away just in time, making Uraraka miss. He then sped off with it to the other side of the room as she crash-landed on the floor. Your quirk is no threat if you can't anything. Ida still keeping up the act. I'll just have to keep this weapon out of your reach as time runs out. Muhahaha. He laughed so evil he might as well be a cartoon villain. But it was not over yet. Uraraka could not let Midoriya down. Downstairs, Bakugo was taunting Midoriya. What's the matter? You look scared. You dodged the attack, so you can still fight, can't you? Come and get me. Midoriya quickly thought how it really quite a downer that Bakugo could now use ranged attacks with the gauntlets, when he radios checked with Uraraka, who told him about how Ida was giving her a strong time. Bakugo hated that. Are you ignoring me again? I'll get you attention. However, All Might called in and told Bakugo that if he did that again he would stop the test right then and there, much to Bakugo's dismay. He also gave him a stern teaching in not destroying the stronghold he should be protecting. After he said that, it made Bakugo rage more than ever as he threw his arms in the air. "Ryag," he shouted out in frustration. "Fine then, I'll fight head to head." He yelled and charged at Midoriya with his explosive quirk. Midoriya was about to counter, but Bakugo saw that and countered the counter by a tiny amount of his power on Midoriya's arm and jumped over him to blast him from behind, doing serious damage to Midoriya. The class back in the monitor room gasped in shock at the brutal display from Bakugo. What was that move? The guy called Todoroki, who was dressed in white clothing with half covered with a layer of ice, observed Bakugo's moves. He doesn't come off as a guy with a strategy, but he is actually quite intelligent. "What are you talking about?" Kirishima asked. "He changed his trajectory in midair using a blast that doubled as a smokescreen. Very clever," Todoroki commented. The girl with the creation quirk Yaoyorozu then said, "A feint attack like that requires an extreme amount of precision. He had to calculate the physics and demonstrate control over his quirk." "Nope, she is wrong. That was instinctive, not a calculation," Alexander thought to himself. "Man, Bakugo is so uber talented," Kaminari complained. Back to the fight. Bakugo was not giving Midoriya an inch of an opening by just attacking him non-stop, and Midoriya was getting more worried and beat by the second. He had no choice. He had to use it if he wanted the match over. Now. And back again in the monitor room. The class getting worried that Bakugo might do something nasty if he wasn't stopped soon. "Bakugo is taking it too far. All he has to is wrap the tape around him, not kill him," Ashido yelled in a horrified tone. Tokoyami agreed. "Bakugo sure acts like a villain." "A really brutal one," Kikuchi commented. Meanwhile, Kaminari was a bit jealous of Bakugo. "I thought Midoriya amazing at the start of the fight, but he is completely outmatched in terms of combat power. Not to mention Bakugo seems like a natural at all of this stuff." All Might was desperately shaking the mic he used to communicate with the students, wondering on whether or not to allow the fight to continue or stop it. If he didn't, Bakugo might do the unthinkable, and on the other hand, this was perhaps the biggest challenge currently that Midoriya needed to overcome. He didn't know what to do. Just then, on the screen, Midoriya's frightened face changed into one with resolve. Alexander saw this and wondered, could he? I think he is. "All Might, don't stop the match," he said, and everyone in the room turned their heads at him in confusion, including All Might. "Huh? What you are talking about?" Ashido asked curiously with sweat coming down her face. "Yeah? I don't know what your deal is, but Bakugo is about to kill Midoriya. Need I remind you?" Kaminari said in sarcastic tone. "Yeah, Midoriya doesn't stand a chance against Bakugo. We need to stop the match now," Kirishima said. The rest of the class agreed. "No, the heroes are about to win," Alexander stated. His statement startled everyone in the room, even All Might. "Win?" Yaoyorozu said. "Don't be delusional. He is not going to win." She clarified to the transfer student. It was sounded almost like it was in a mocking tone. Alexander chuckled. "Oh, that's what you think? Sorry to tell you, but I think you might eat those in just a moment. Besides, I think it'll be unfair for Midoriya if we stopped the fight here and now before he got to execute his plan," he said, alarming the class yet again. "A plan? I suppose it's possible," Kirishima said skeptically. "But how?" Zero asked, really confused. "Wait and see," Alexander replied. "Wait and see? Don't make us laugh," Todoroki said, annoyed of how that foolish that sounded. "Explain to us, then, how Midoriya is supposed to win," Yaoyorozu said, clearly disagreeing with that wild assessment. "I never said I knew how," Alexander said, shrugging his shoulders. Kaminari went, "Huh, then how else are they going to win? Ida is racing around with the bomb and Bakugo is—" However, Alexander stopped him mid-sentence. "All right, shut up for a moment," he said in a serious, annoyed tone. "Correct me if I'm wrong, but have any of you ever been in a real combat scenario before?" The students were silent. "No, I thought so," Since that is the case, you should all be informed that not a single thing that was ever covered in whatever school training you do have is going to be directly transferred into real life. True fighting experience can only be found in real combat. Furthermore, none of you have any idea on Midoriya and this Bakugo's full combative thinking and strengths. So, cease this useless bantering and watch. Thank you. The students were stunned. Just who the hell did this guy think he was? Kaminari was taken back by his tone and turned to All Might. Sir, don't listen to him. He is crazy to think they will win. He told the pro hero. Yes, I agreed. He is very wrong. All the odds are against Midoriya. Yayurazu, she said. All Might didn't respond. It was quite for what seemed like a whole minute. Sir? Yayurazu asked to grab All Might's attention back. All Might slowly pulled away the mic. The match will continue, he said. What? They all said, shocked at what he said. If the unthinkable happens, I will hold myself responsible. And if not, the heroes will overcome one of the greatest obstacles they have faced so far. All Might said. The room was quiet again. Was All Might really going to let this happen? They wanted to protest, but to the number one hero. And more importantly, was he agreeing with the lunatic? No one said word thereafter, and reluctantly they continued to watch the match. All Might looked out of the corner of his eye at Alexander. Young Kawoksik, do you see the same hero in Midoriya as I do? Or is there something that only you can see? He wondered. Back to the fight. Bakugo as walking towards Midoriya, who was up against the wall. Why won't you use your DMN quirk against me? Still you can stop me without it, he angrily snapped at him. Midoriya, without said a word, narrowed his eyes at Bakugo. That's not it, he said, looking down on the ground. You have been hiding your true power for years. What's the deal, Deku? Bakugo continued walking. Did you think you better than me this entire time? Midoriya was about to cry. That's what you think, you idiot, he finally said, tears going down his face. You have always been stronger, Kachin. I know you are better than me, he cried out. It angered Bakugo, like everything else that had happened so far. Can't you see? Midoriya continued. That's why I want to beat you, because you are amazing, he shouted. You are even more of an idiot than I realized, Bakugo said, and formed another psychopathic smile. Come at me, he yelled. The two charged at each other. Time was slowed as the two rivals jumped forward. The people in monitor room watched intensely as the two near each other. Detroit. Ah! They are going to kill each other, Kirishima said back in the monitor room. Yorurak now, Midoriya shouted. And everyone in the room sounded a huh? Yororaka one floor heard what Midoriya said. Right, she said, and grabbed on to a pillar in the room. Midoriya's tears got swept away in the air. Bakugo was right. He couldn't win against him in a one-on-one fight here. But they could still capture the objective. Alexander could see the writing on the wall and decided he wanted a closer look. Without anyone seeing him, he left the monitor room and sprinted really fast over to the building where the fight was taking place. In flash, instead of hitting Bakugo with his punch, Midoriya punched upwards and blocked Bakugo's attack with his other arm. The shock wave from Midoriya's punch flew upward and through the floor above and continued knocking out windows, loose garbage, and making cracks in the stone all the way up until a stream of air came out of the building like a superpower water sprinkler. It lasted for several minutes. Alexander, who was running down the street, saw the huge airstream. Quite the sight for the young devil hunter. At least he now knew their specific location. At the same time, Ida looked in total shock as giant holes suddenly appeared on the floor. What is happening? He yelled, his voice almost cracked. Uraraka still held on to the pillar, and she made weightless so she could use it as a baseball bat. This is it, she screamed. Sorry, Ida, she said to him before SWNGNG with the pillar. Improvised special move, comic home run. Uraraka hit all the tiny rocks and rubble that was in the air, and they started flying towards Ida at terrifying speed, so he quickly had to dodge if he didn't want to get hit. But he didn't have the time, so he instead covered himself. In the name villainy, I demand you stop this. Seeing her opportunity again, Uraraka jumped across the hole in the floor. Release, and landed on the fake bomb. I got it. With the bomb secured, the hero team had won. Ida still panicked though in his role. No, the weapon. Everyone in the monitor room was staring in disbelief, except for Alexander, who was running down the streets of the fake city. to get to the hero and villain pair's location. A moment later, Bakugo stood underneath the gate hole Deku had made and started shaking. "This was your plan," he stammered, and then was on the verge of crying. "You were playing me this entire time, you bstrd." "I wasn't," Midoriya said, stammering too. Going to use it. When the smoke settled away, Midoriya was revealed to have been severely damaged on his left and right arms, and his body was exhausted beyond belief. "Body can't handle the backlash of my power yet," Mr. Aizawa said. "I'd be useless, but this was all that I could think of. This was the only way that I had at winning." Bakugo wide-eyed in horror as soon as he saw just how destroyed Midoriya was, just how much he was willing to damage himself to win against him. Meanwhile, the timer ran out. "You did it," All Might whispered to himself in surprise. Back at the building, Midoriya fell to the ground and passed out, leaving Bakugo stunned and unable to move. Alexander himself had just arrived at the location. Too bad he didn't get too much of the destruction. DMN Midoriya really did a number on this place. After staring at the destroyed building for a few seconds, he then proceeded to do several high acrobatic jumps in order to get to the floor where Bakugo and Midoriya was. All Might's voice suddenly came in over the radio channel. "The hero team wins." All the other students in the monitor room still stood processing what happened. Yaoyorozu reluctantly turned to Alexander while talking. "Fine, you were right. The hero team won. I hope you are happy because that could have gone see." She then turned to see that Kawoksik was no longer in the room, as well as dumbfounding the rest of the class. "What? Where did Kawoksik go?" Gyro asked, the rest of the class thinking the same thing. "He was here like 5 minutes ago," So said. Hashido noticed something out in the corner of her eyes and looked at the screen. "How the... Everyone look," she yelled to the class and pointed at the screen. The students were shocked to see it was Alexander. He was at the place where hero and villain team fought. "When in the world did he get there?" Kaminari yelled. "Half the building is destroyed. He managed to get all the way up the building to them," Ojiro remarked. Meanwhile, Alexander walked over to Midoriya's unconscious body. Behind him was Bakugo, who still too stunned that the nobody he had known since they were children had suddenly beat him. Alexander leaned down to check on Midoriya. Just like the entrance exam, Midoriya's skin looked burned out, but thankful it was only one of his arms rather than all of his limbs. Alexander then noticed the little headset All Might had given the two teams. He carefully picked it up and put it on. "Hello, anyone there? Uyuhuo." With All Might in the monitor room along with the other students. Wow, he got there quick. "Ah yes, young Kawoksik, I read you loud and clear. Can you hear me?" "I read you," Alexander replied. "Good sense. Hang on a moment, I think I can turn on the speaker on this thing." All Might searched for a second and found the button he looked for and pressed it. "Ah yes, here it is, young Kawoksik. Everyone in the room should now be able to hear you, too." "Okay, cool," Alexander casually responded. "Now since you are there already, I want you to tell me of Midoriya's status," All Might said. Okay," Alexander said. However, the method he used was not what a medic would call useful. After a second or two, Alexander unexpectedly slapped Midoriya across the face in order to a reaction, which he did when Midoriya made a little "oh" sound. The students were shocked again. Yeah, like that was a good idea. All Might even sweat dropped a little. "That's not how you help someone," Shoji remarked on Alexander's version on a checkup. Meanwhile, Alexander seemed to have awoken Midoriya from his sleeping state. "Oh, hello Alexander," Midoriya said, his voice sounding completely disoriented, and he looked exhausted beyond belief. "I am not dead, am I?" he asked, not being fully aware of what was going on. "Nah, you are still alive. Contracts on winning the match," Alexander said, congratulated him. "I won, oh that's cool, I guess. You mind if I go back to sleep?" Midoriya asked with his eyes darting off in different directions. "I don't see why not. Next time you wake up you'll probably be in the nurse's office," Alexander said. "Okay, thanks, nighty-night," Midoriya said, closed his eyes and went out like the light of a snuffed candle. Alexander then stood up again and held a hand to his ear. "Seems fine to me, All Might," he told him over the headset. All Might's voice came in over the headset. Good, maybe next time you can be a little gentler when checking up on someone, he suggested. A voice then came from above. Hey, Alex. Alexander looked up to see Uraraka and Ida looking down from the destroyed floor. Oh hey, what's up guys, he yelled back so they could hear him. What are you doing here? Weren't you in the monitor room with All Might and the rest? Uraraka shouted confused. Oh, that was boring, so I decided to come here to see it with my own eyes. By the way, congrats on winning. Oh yeah, Ida, you did a fine job too, Alexander yelled back. Ida yelled. Why thank you, Alexander, but how are Bakugo and Midoriya? What is their status? They are breathing, so I imaging they are in no real danger, though Midoriya might need to visit the recovery girl. I'll stay here for a little while longer, you two go ahead back to the monitor room, Alexander shouted. All right, we see you back with the others, Uraraka yelled back and her and Ida left. Meanwhile, the explosive boy, Bakugo, had been standing nearby, not moving a single muscle nor muttered a single word. He looked like fine, so Alexander didn't bother to check on him. But back with the other classmates, they noticed the state of the heroes. What a wired way for this to end, Kaminari said. The losers are practically untouched, and the winners are both on the ground. Takoyami with the crow head stated, How does the old saying go? They may have lost the battle, but they won the war. This class is intense. The frog girl Asui summed up the event nicely. Later, after getting Midoriya to Recovery Girl's office, both the hero team and the villain team met up with the class for All Might to then give out the results. Well, despite the results, the MVP, most valued player of this exercise, is young Ida, All Might announced, and the class was surprised, and so was Ida. Shouldn't it be one of the heroes instead since they are the winners? Asui asked the large hero. Valid question, All Might said. Why didn't I choose one of those two? Who has a guess? He asked. Yayurazu lifted a hand in the air. Sir, I can tell you why, she proclaimed. Ida embraced this challenge. He was the only one who truly adapted to his assigned role. I'll explain. Bakugo judgment was clouded by a personal grudge against Midoriya. As he pointed out earlier, launching a large-scale attack indoors was a foolish move. It could have been disastrous. Similarly, Midoriya's plan was also poorly thought out considering the amount of damage he did to his body. He rendered himself helpless, not smart. As for Uraraka, she let her guard down mid-battle, and her final attack was far too reckless, given the hypothetical stakes. If she treated the fake weapon if it were real, she would never have risked using such an imprecise move. Ida was fully prepared for his opponent's arrival. He had a strategy and never lost sight of his mission to protect the dummy weapon, even if he was foiled at the end. Ida never felt so prideful in his life until he heard those exact words, and he was filled with joy. Technically, the hero team won, yes, but they took advantage of the fact this was training. They didn't respect the spirit of the trail. Yayurazu finished, and everyone looked at her. All Might was completely taken back by her analysis. She hit every point he thought of. Yes, well, you overlooked a few things. Young Ida could have relaxed a little bit in the exercises, but otherwise you nailed it. He gave her the thumbs up. One should always start with the basics and devote themselves wholeheartedly to learning. That's the only real way to become a pro hero, Yarazu stated with DSPLN. Yayurazu was one of the few who entered via recommendation. That's what Darda always told me, Alexander thought. But in truth, there are plenty of times where he did not listen to anything they said. It always brought a little smirk when he thought about it too. Now then, All Might said, let's get on with the next match. The test went on with different teams going up against each other like the first two, but thankfully they weren't as explosive as the first. They also relocated to a similar building since the first was a bust. Bakugo was standing completely still processing everything that went down between him and Midoriya, so he didn't say anything for the rest of the exercise. The first two teams were Team B, the heroes with Todoroki and Shoji, and Team I, the villains with Ojiro and Hagakure the Invisible Girl. Todoroki made an impressive display by simply freezing the entire place over with ice, so the villain team couldn't move. And when he won, he melted away all the ice with the side of his quirk fire, and then he stated, "It's not your fault. We are just playing on different levels." Todoroki was also recommended to the school. Ice and fire, huh? A good combination, really, Alexander thought. Next place was Battle Building C, and the teams were Team J and Team H. It was Kirishima and Shiro versus Tokoyami and Isui. And it went all the chain until all the matches were done and over with. However, since there were 2 extra members of the class that year, All Might had something special planned. All right, for our last 2 students, they are going to have to do things a little different. A hero versus villain standoff, All Might announced. Standoff? The students wondered. Think of it like Brawl, but the hero has to catch the villain with a roll of capture tape. If the villain manages to avoid getting caught within a 3-minute countdown, they win. If the hero catches the villain, he or she wins. I am going to face Alexander, Kikuchi thought. She was slightly nervous, but still she came to this school for a reason. Alexander thought this was going to really one-sided, but hey, he had to do it anyway. All Might went up and pulled out the ball to see who gets to play hero and villain. The villain for the standoff is Riina Kikuchi, and the hero is Alexander Kowalczyk. Uger, this is going to be really unfair for Kikuchi, Uraraka said. She wouldn't go up against someone like Alexander. While I think we should cheer on them both, it is rather one-sided. Ida agreed. Alexander smirked and turned to the white-haired girl. Iriler, I said you shouldn't judge someone's combat ability too fast. But then again, I'll take the gold on this one. Kikuchi felt a little annoyed that she had already been called the loser, and she then said to the transfer student, with fiery spirit, just so you know, I won't go down easy. Though she was fully aware that Alexander did score the highest amount of points in the entrance exam, still going down without as much as at least showing some resistance was not something she could allow herself. Alexander kind of liked seeing her get a little fiery. However, All Might wasn't done talking. Now, there. I haven't told you both of the challenge yet. Challenge? The rest of the class asked. All Might placed both hands on his hips. The hero is not allowed to harm the villain in this exercise. The new information startled the class. What? Hold on, the hero is not allowed to fight the villain? Just why is that a thing? Kaminari asked, frustrated. Let me tell you, young Kaminari, All Might said. The villain is one going around looking for anyone so they can fulfill the wicked desire to harm others for personal pleasure. It is up to the hero to stop the villain from hurting others, but it does not mean that the hero should engage in combat. If the hero can take down the villain without a scratch, that means that the hero was in the right, by not resorting to fisticuffs. Therefore, for this exercise, young Kowalczyk is not allowed to fight. This is going to be an uphill battle then, since Alexander is more of brawler judging from the entrance exam results. Todoroki thought. The transfer student was at a major disadvantage. However, all the students then raised an eyebrow when they heard Alexander chuckle. Ha. And here I thought this was going to get boring. Wait, was he really not afraid? All right, got me a little more interested. But there is one thing I would like before doing this, he said to All Might. What might that be, young Kowalczyk? All Might asked. Alexander raised his right hand, showing 2 figures. Is it possible to get 2 capture tape rolls? 2? Kikuchi thought curiously. I don't see why not. All right, you get 2 with you for the standoff exercise. All Might agreed. Later, when both Kikuchi and Alexander had made it outside, Kikuchi and Alexander had placed themselves in the middle of the street where cars would drive if it were a real city. The asphalt they were standing on ran with white lines to separate the 2 drive paths for cars. Looking confident as always, Alexander stood looking at his opponent Kikuchi, who was looking back with a determined expression. Meanwhile, in the monitor room, the students waited patiently for the standoff exercise. I know we said already that this Alexander guy is crazy, but I think it needs to be said again, Kirishima said, and many of his new classmates agreed. He sure didn't seem scared one bit though, Sato said. He also sure is rude, Shiro said. Hey, perhaps this guy is nothing more than hot air and he got lucky in the entrance exam, Kaminari said, thinking just maybe was not as great as he thought. I do not believe so, Ida said, and the rest looked at him. I saw Alexander stare down the Type 4 villain, not flinching once while the rest of us ran away. From the look on his, he was going to charge at it, meaning he must be very confident in his abilities. That or he is suicidal, Todoroki commented. Speaking of his abilities, do you two know what his quirk is? Yaoyorozu asked Ada and Uraraka. His quirk? No, I don't think he ever mentioned it. Uraraka told them. It's rare to see someone use a sword, Ajiro commented. I guess we'll find out soon enough. He is at disadvantage, and I don't think he'll allowed to use that sword on his back either, Shoji said. That coat is stylish though, have to admit, Kirishima remarked. However, All Might then said out loud that the standoff was about to commence. Outside in the street again, Alexander and Kikuchi were still sizing each other up. I have to show that I am good. I have to do this for my family, Kikuchi thought. Her reason for joining you was what gave her the will to give it her all. All Might's voice came in over their headsets. All right, I have set the machines to count the exact amount of time has passed, and it will give us the precise decimal if young Kawaksik should be the winner. A small pause. Begin. Kikuchi quickly formed crystals around her arms that then formed into hooks, and she then charged at Alexander. Ha! As she went. That quirk Kikuchi has is both pretty and useful, Ashido said. I wonder how Alexander is going to deal with that, Asui said. As Kikuchi came closer, Alexander waited for just the right moment. When Kikuchi came close enough, she swung her right crystal hook arm at him, but Alexander counted on that and jumped high up above her. The next moment time slowed down as Alexander took both capture tape rolls and struck both ends together. The next thing that happened was truly astonishing. Alexander spun around in circles and WHP around with the two rolls of capture tape. Before Kikuchi knew it, the capture tape started to swirl around her in a big amount. Alexander then landed 2 meters behind her and then pulled the two rolls, so the tape tightened its hold. Kikuchi was now completely tied up, with no means of escape. Alexander noticed that the rolls were out of tape and then quickly threw up both rolls and also quickly equipped his sword to slice the tape from the empty rolls. Lighting fast, he caught both empty rolls with his left hand. Boop, 13. 2 seconds, the compute calculated. Kikuchi fell backwards on her rear and was wide-eyed trying to process what the hell just happened. Did she just lose? Meanwhile, in the monitor room, everyone there was wide-eyed, open-mouthed and speechless. Even All Might was a little taken back. DMN, that kid has some spunk, he muttered to himself before realizing it was his Kui. Oh, the hero wins. It was quiet in the room for about 10 seconds before Ada and Uraraka started applauding. Marvelous, spectacular, Alexander, you are a sight to behold, Ada yelled. That is so cool, Alex, Uraraka joined in. Meanwhile, Todoroki couldn't believe what he was seeing. That Alexander guy managed to react and fully calculate on how he swung around that capture tape in manner that he could use to capture Kikuchi. It was now official. That Alexander guy was no pushover. He even predicted the previous fight based on very few calculations and factors. But he be DMN if he let Alexander beat him. The guy is a bit of a crazy jerk, but oh boy, it seems he can back up his fighting prowess easily. Kirishima acknowledged Alexander as a great combatant. I clearly was wrong about him too. I'll admit he's quite something else. Yaoyorozu said, amazed as everyone else. And so fast too. If I had blinked, I could have easily missed it. Incredible, Jiro said. Bakugo, who was in the corner the entire time, was also the room. He felt down again after seeing the swords guy performed an astonishing feat. Kikuchi could still not believe she lost this quickly to someone. Was this what hero work being all about? Her thoughts were interrupted when suddenly heard a slight sound coming from behind her. She looked over her shoulder to see Alexander standing next to her with his eyes closed and smirking, and she suddenly felt the capture tape loosen and fall off of her. He must have cut it, she thought. Unexpectedly, Alexander then placed his sword on his back and reached down with his hand. With a sincere voice, smile and open eyes, he said, "Come, we should head back to the others," offering to help her to her feet. Kikuchi briefly stared at him before biting her pride and gladly accepted the helping hand. Hey, I know this might sound hypocritical coming from me, but maybe he is not such a bad guy after all, Kaminari said. A few minutes later, Alexander and Kikuchi rejoined with the rest of the class. Well done, hero. You managed to successfully capture the villain with most excellent speed. You get the U, a seal of approval. All Might gave a thumbs up. "Thank you kindly," Alexander said humorously. All Might then walked over to Kikuchi, who still looked down. "Young Kikuchi," he said, and she looked up as a response. "You lost, yes, but don't let it discourage you. A true hero doesn't let defeat hold them down for long. Once you are done, you get right back and try again until you succeed." All Might words re-energized Kikuchi as she unintendedly saluted him. "Sir?" All Might nodded and turned around. "That's it for today, future heroes. Return to your classroom and ready yourselves for the rest session," he said, and then sprinted out, leaving a trail of dust. But the dust was big, and all the students started coughing and waving their hands. "What, don't they clean this place at all?" Kaminari complained while still coughing away dust from his mouth. Sometime later, Midoriya woke up in the nurse office, and he noticed how it was late afternoon. He walked back to his classroom, his arms wrapped in bandages and hero outfit torn and dirtied. He had missed all the afternoon class, which he would defiantly get an earful from Mr. Aizawa. Maybe he would choke him with his scarf or something, he thought. As he walked the hallway, he could see he was nearing his classroom. Everyone had probably gone home by now, so all he had to do was get his stuff and leave. Midoriya opened the door slowly, using only his left arm since the other was still out of order, so to speak. To his surprise, he found that most of the class was still in the room, just hanging around. "Hey, it's Midoriya," Kurashima said, announcing Midoriya's return. "Good to see you back, Super." Some students, including Kirishima, went over to Midoriya. Their facial expressions were enthusiastic. "Man, I don't know what you sang during that match, but you were all fired up, huh?" Zero went next. "I can't believe you held your own against Bakugo. He is super strong." He admired Midoriya's determination. "You did a great job dodging," Ashido giddied. "You guys really turned up in the first match, so none of us held back in our rounds either," Sato explained. Midoriya couldn't believe that he inspired the rest of the class to give it their all. The near people quickly introduced themselves to him. Meanwhile, Tokoyami was getting an earful from Ida for sitting on a desk, though everyone just ignored him. It was clear that Ida had a lot tension. He never relaxed. "Oh yeah, Midoriya, by the way, something really cool happened during Kawaksik and Kikuchi its match," Ashido said. "Oh, what happened?" Midoriya asked curiously. Kirishima went to explain. "They had another kind of match than we had. Alexander had to capture Kikuchi, who was playing the villain, without laying a finger on her. Alexander jumped over Kikuchi and tied her down with 2 rolls completely empty, and the fight lasted only 13 seconds. He ended the match by never even fighting." Midoriya was really surprised to hear that. He looked down the first-line desks to see the young man they were talking about reading a book. Alexander quickly became aware that they were talking about him and just as quickly waved with his point finger and index finger before going back to reading. Next to him was Kikuchi, checking her sunglasses. "Wow, he is really far ahead already," Midoriya thought. "I never thought it was possible to win without ever coming into confrontation with someone in these things. To think he captures someone without fighting seemed so unlikely." Just then the door to the classroom opened. "So anyway, it was Kaminari and Uraraka. "Want to grab a bit sometime?" he asked Uraraka as they came in through the door, holding a stack of books each. "Anything sweet," Uraraka answered, but then noticed Midoriya had returned from the nurse's office. "Hey Deku." She left the company of Kaminari and walked over to the messy-haired young man. She saw that Midoriya had not recovered from the wounds he got. "Why didn't she heal your injuries?" she asked. "Oh well, it has to do with how much stamina I am using," Midoriya nervously explained. Alexander picked up on what he said. "So, Recovery Girl's quirk is not as effective as he thought it was. Guess it really didn't matter since he had a regeneration power of his own." Midoriya scanned the room quick to see if Bakugo was still here. He wasn't. He turned to Uraraka. Uraraka? Where is Kachin?" he asked her. "We tried to stop him from leaving, but he wouldn't listen. You just missed him," she said. Midoriya, without any other words, sprinted out the class. "Huh? Midoriya," Uraraka said. "Where do you think he is going in such a hurry?" Ashido said. "He probably going to check to see if he can't catch Bakugo before he leaves the school area," Tokoyami said from across the room. "I don't think I need to get in the middle of this one," Alexander thought. Alexander stopped reading his book and put it in his backpack. He then rose from his desk. "All right, guys, I am retreating for today. See you all tomorrow," he said. "Bye," Uraraka said. "See ya tomorrow, dude," Kaminari said. Alexander got home and, like the day before, changed clothes and sat in the couch. He pulled out his phone and started sending messages to Miss Calhoun. All Darte agents use famous names of the Renaissance era as code names. Alexander's hunter code name was DaVinci, while Miss Calhoun was Michelangelo. "DaVinci, Miss Calhoun, are there any assignments today?" "Michelangelo, no, I am afraid not. Those there are outside of Japan. Sorry. Hope you are doing well in school." Alexander sighed in disappointment. He hadn't had a good devil hunting mission in a long while, and it was kind of getting on his nerves. Oh well, at least you was somewhat interesting to him. Next morning, every student going to school was almost assaulted by the news media. Like Midoriya, who was trying to avoid the press, but they jumped on him like prey. "Hey you," a reporter said and shoved her mic up in Midoriya's face. "Can you tell what it's like to work so close to All Might?" Midoriya nervously waved his arms around to back away from the group. "I am sorry, but I need to get to the nurse's office. Yeah, right away." Next prey they found was Uraraka. "Are you one of All Might's students? Tell us, what is the symbol of peace like in person?" Uraraka had no idea on how reply, so she improvised as best as she could. What's he like?" "Well, he is super muscly, yeah." Then, as Alexander came around the corner and the same press journalist came up to him, "Excuse me, can why?" "Nope," Alexander said as he avoided them. Then there was Ida. "How is All Might faring as a teacher? What are you learning?" the report asked, and she got more than she wanted from Ida. "His leadership and wisdom remind me on a daily basis that I attend world's most prestigious educational institution. Of course, he is the personification of honor and integrity that one would expect, but he also not afraid to show his student his more humorous side." Ida explained to the press, who was getting bored quickly. Ida wasn't really giving the juicy details they were looking for. Next up was Bakugo. Whoever saw Bakugo ishly threatened them to PSS off, if you want to be clear. Finally, the last person that the press came in contact with was Mr. Aizawa. "Please, sir, can you get All Might for us?" the reporter pleaded. But it was to no avail. "All Might is not on campus today. Now get out of here, you disturb our students enough already." He casually waved them off, looking like he really needed some sleep. As Aizawa was walking into the school, he wondered on how All Might deal with that much attention. The reporter that was with the press was defeated so easily. "All right," she said and clenched on the microphone she was holding. You won't bring All Might out, I get him myself." "No, wait, hold on," a cameraman shouted. Suddenly, without warning, the gate to U closed with several shutters making a thick barricade. "What's happening?" the reporter yelled as the barricade nearly hit her. "Don't you know about the school's defensives? This gate is the UA barrier," the cameraman explained. "Defenses? It practically killed me," the reporter shouted. "Well, it's designed to stop anyone who doesn't have a student ID or special pass from entering. Guess it works." The cameraman said, much to the reporter's anger. Apparently, there are security sensors like this all over campus. "Keeping the public out? This school thinks it's untouchable. At least they can do is grant one interview," the reporter said. "I know, right? We have been here for 2 days, and I don't have a single comment on record yet," the cameraman said. The story on why the media was so interested in you was because it was announced that All Might was going to become a faculty teacher. The news took the nation by storm, and every news outlet wanted a piece of the story. However, they were not the only ones. A few minutes later in class, Mr. Aizawa came through the door. "Decent work on yesterday's combat training, you guys," Aizawa said. "I saw the video feeds and went over each of your team's results. Bakugo, you are talented, so don't sulk like a child about your loss, okay?" Bakugo simply ignored his comment. "Yeah, whatever." "And Midoriya," Aizawa said, and Midoriya paid attention. "I see the only way you won the match was by messing up your arm again." Midoriya started looking down into his lap. "Work harder, and don't give me the excuse that you don't have control over your quirk." That line is already getting old. You can't keep breaking your body while training here. Your quirk could be really useful if you could get a handle on it. So, show a little urgency, huh? Midoriya's attitude changed to a more positive one when Aizawa said the last line. Right, he said. Mr. Aizawa then turned to transfer student. Also, Kawoksik. Again, you made an impressive win. Good work capturing Kikuchi. Yeah, cool, whatever. Alexander brushed him off, and Aizawa didn't seem to care that he did. Kikuchi, who was sitting next to him, didn't understand why he was so light on getting a compliant from a teacher. She would totally kill, not really for one. Still exemplary work, Mr. Aizawa said. Now on to the business at hand. Our first task will decide your future. Everyone in the class gulped when he said that. Was it another quirk test? You all need to pick a class representative, Mr. Aizawa said. Everyone sighed in relief. Just normal school stuff finally. But just a moment after, everyone immediately shot up their hands to get the position like. Pick me. I'll take it. Yeah, you gonna need me. Someone with style woo. I am totally the right pick. In a normal classroom, representative students would only get extra work. But at it was different. Becoming a class rep could show the skills one had in leadership, which hero agencies closely looked for. Alexander decided to stay out of that. No way should he be representing the class. Everyone, please, Ida shouted, catching his class attention. The class rep's duty is to lead others. That is not something just anyone can do. You must first have the trust of every student in the classroom. Therefore, the most logical way to fill this position is democratically. We will hold an election, he announced, and he also held up an arm because he also wanted to get picked badly. Is this really the best idea? Kaminari asked. We have only known each other a few days. How do we know who we can trust? Asui said. Besides, everyone will just vote for themselves, Kirishima said. Most people will. But that means whoever does receive multiple votes must truly be the most suitable person for the job. Ida elaborated and turned to Mr. Aizawa. It's the best way, right, sir? Do what you want, Mr. Aizawa said while rolling himself in his sleeping bag. Just decide before my nap is over. He then passively fell to the ground to get some shut-eye. Thank you for your trust, Ida said and began setting of for the voting. After, when everyone had gone up to the blackboard to set a point to who they wanted elected, the results were in. It mostly showed that everyone had voted on themselves except for two. Coming in first was Midoriya and close second was Yaoyorozu. How did I get 3 votes? Midoriya shouted, bewildered. Bakugo was not happy. Okay, you idiots. Who voted for him? What? Do you want us to think anyone would pick you? Shiro said, much to Bakugo's rage dismay. While they were conversing, Ida was taken back by how he only got 0 votes. He didn't vote for himself. He thought he would like to have gotten a little more. But still he could not argue with the system he chose. All right, the class rep is Midoriya and our deputy is Yaoyorozu, Mr. Aizawa said, still sitting in sleeping bag. Midoriya was shaking, but that was nothing new, and Yaoyorozu thought on her how she got picked in the first place. This might not be so bad, Asui said. Yeah, I can get behind Midoriya, I guess. Yaoyorozu is not a bad pick either, Kirishima said. Later at the school cafeteria, or what it was also called, Lunch Rush's Eatery. It always so crowded in here, Uraraka complained. Her, Midoriya, Alexander, Kikuchi and Ida were sitting together to get lunch at the same table. Oh yeah, aren't all the students from all factions of you coming here to eat or something? Kikuchi asked. You are correct. The hero course, support, etc. also come here for lunch, Ida confirmed. Alexander was looking at the menu card. Unfortunately, from what he could tell, which was strong since he still did not understand all the letters, yet there were no burgers in this place. Tragic. Ooh guys, I am worried about the class rep thing. I don't think I am qualified, Midoriya confessed to them. Sure, you are, Uraraka said before taking another bit rice from her bowl. You'll be great, Ida said, reassuring him. Your courage and quick thinking under stress will help make you a worthy leader. Not mention the strength you demonstrated. Those are the reasons I voted for you at least. Midoriya was surprised. You were one of the three? He asked Ida. Wanting a job and or being suited to it are quite different things. Observing the Ida family's hero agency has taught me that much, Ida said. Midoriya and Uraraka picked up on that last part. Agency? They both said at the same time. You a part of those family hero agencies? I had no idea, Ida. Kikuchi took part of the conversation. Ida had put himself on the spot. Oh, he muttered. You know I have been wondering something about you, Uraraka said. Her expression changed to a direct, joyful kind. Admit it, Ida. You are filthy rich, she said with an excited tone. Ida was sweat dropping when she said that, but there was no reason to deny it now. I was afraid that people would treat me differently if they knew about my family. Midoriya, Uraraka, and Kikuchi were a little too curious, so they started staring at him with interest, while Alexander didn't show any interest. Ida could not stop them from being curious, so decided on telling them. He took a heavy sigh. You see, the Idas have been pro-heroes for generations. It runs in our BLD. What? That's awesome, Midoriya, Uraraka, and Kikuchi all said in unison. Are the three of you familiar with the turbo hero Ingenium? Ida asked. Midoriya was getting into the hero talk. I know all about him. He is a super popular pro with 65 sidekicks working alongside him at his Tokyo agency. Don't tell me. Ida stood up proud and told the two. He is my elder brother. He is so famous. I can't believe it. Can I get an autograph? The three odd. Ingenium is an unmatched commander who honors the hero code. As the second oldest Ida's son, I strive to be just like him. He sat down again. However, I think it might be a bit soon for me to assume a real leadership role. Kikuchi then turned to Kawalczyk, who was still trying to read the menu. Alexander? I never really asked you, but where are you from exactly? Alexander, who had not been paying attention, looked up from the menu card. Sorry what I wasn't paying attention. What are you guys talking about? Kikuchi asked where you are from, Kawalczyk. I, myself, am a little curious. Mind telling? Ida said. And I haven't really asked you either. Uraraka. Okay, one thing first. Refer to me as Alexander or what Uraraka nicknamed Alex, Alexander said. Oh, glad you like it, Uraraka quickly commented. Now, what was the question again? Alexander asked. We ask where you are from. The teachers keep referring to you as a transfer student from overseas, but your accent sounds very fluent to me. Plus, Kawalczyk is not exactly a Japanese name, Ida told him. Oh yeah, I am from Russia, Alexander said and flipped the menu card to view the back of it. Wow, really? Huh, I would never have guessed, Kikuchi said. Where in Russia? Moscow, Alexander replied. The capital? That sounds cool. How does your parents feel about you coming over to attend UA? Midoriya asked. Yeah, they are quite dead. I was orphaned at the age 8. Alexander explained, not to sounding too bothered, but still a tiny bit sour from what the other could tell. The four others felt like they had just intruded on the mudded dark ground that was Alexander's family life and how they might just had hurt his feelings. I am sorry for your loss. Midoriya had no idea on how to salvage the situation. Thanks, but no need to feel that way for me. It has been around over 9 years, Alexander said and reached down his shirt. When he got his hand back up, held a sword-shaped amulet. Besides, I got this as a memento from my mother before she died. All four of them took a close look at the amulet Alexander was showing. It was quite appealing. That looks pretty, Uraraka commented. Thanks. My father made it for my mother when they first met. Needless to say, it means a lot, Alexander said. If you ask me, I think your parents would be very proud of you getting into UA, Ida said. Thanks, Alexander simply replied. If you only knew the real reason why I am here. Become a pro hero as a cover for my other, unhealthier job, Alexander thought. Midoriya then turned his head to the other girl sitting with them. Carefully and nervously he asked Kikuchi, So, why did you decide to become a pro hero, Kikuchi? The white-haired girl was not prepared to answer that question and also immediately threw her in vague defense to not talk about it. Me? Oh, there is no real reason really. I just want to do my part in keeping the world safe and all. Yep, totally, that's why I am here. The others could not help but notice the sudden defensive act she put up out of the blue. They wanted to ask if something was wrong, but didn't have the time, as just suddenly, a loud bell was heard all across the school and all students stopped dead in their tracks. An automated voice came over the loudspeakers. Warning, Level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate the building in an orderly fashion. It repeated a few times. Ida turned to another student that was right next to him. What's a Level 3 security breach? He asked him. The student responded quickly. It means someone have managed to pass the school's barrier. This hasn't happened in my 3 years here. We should get going. The student quickly left his seat and began running away. Thereafter panic swept through the cafeteria as students tried get to the exit as fast as possible. It was utter chaos seeing the students of hysterically pushing and screaming at each other to make it out of the cafeteria. Unfortunately, Midoriya, Alexander, Uraraka, Ida and Kikuchi were right in the middle of the crowd. Aho, this is a total mob, Uraraka complained while being pressed at from all sides. Hey, don't touch me there, Kikuchi sounded angrily, but no one reacted. Everyone was quick to react. Expected from you, students, Ida trying to see the bright side of the situation. Midoriya and Alexander were not agreeing. Sure, but they are also causing a huge panic, Midoriya yelled. Yeah, we can totally see just how the students show their resolve by running in terror. I mean it not like this is a school for training heroes or anything. Alexander complained sarcastically. Villains attacking you. Was to him just as stupid as seeing robbers trying to rob a police station. Though that view may have changed now since everyone was panicking like children. Soon thereafter all five were beginning to split away from each other in various directions. Alexander managed to get to the window walls on the right side. If these supposed future heroes would stop panicking, he could probably figure out who the people are that are attacking. How many students does this school have? He said out loud, but no one reacted. He then turned around to look out the window. Ahead saw what had caused the alarm to go off. It wasn't villains attacking, it was the press that had made it inside school grounds. What the? This isn't an attack at all, he said out loud, but nobody heard him. He then noticed that Ida was almost right next to him. He quickly grabbed his shoulder and dragged him over to where he was. Alexander? Ida asked confused. Ida, look, Alexander said and pointed out of the window to where the media was standing. What? That is the press that's outside, Ida said. Yeah, this whole thing is no real danger at all, Alexander yelled so he could be heard. Outside with the media stood President Mike and Mr. Aizawa telling them to go off. The same reporter from before was practically biting at them to give in. All you have to do is give us All Might. He is here somewhere. He decided to stay off, President Mike said. Just give us one good comment, on record, and then we'll leave. Another said. Mr. Aizawa wasn't buying that. I know how you people work. Give you an inch and you want a mile. President Mike whispered to Aizawa. They are trespassing. That means they are kind of like villains. Why don't we just beat them up? Aizawa did not like that idea at all. Don't you even think about it. Unless you want your name dragged through the mud. Let's wait for the cops. Back to the panicked students inside. There is no need to worry, everyone, Ida shouted, but no reaction. I don't think they can hear you, Alexander told him. Are we the only ones here who realizes everything is fine? Ida asked the obvious. Looks that way. We need to find a way to make them all shut up and listen. But how? Alexander said, not knowing how to handle this one. Let me think, Ida said. Their chains of thought were interrupted when they heard Uraraka and Kikuchi scream in pain as they were dragged away with the panicked students. Uraraka, Ida shouted. Tenya, Alex, she shouted back. Help us, Kikuchi shouted too. Tenya Ida sudden found the solution. Alexander, I have an idea. But I need to get Uraraka. Help me get there. All right, Alexander said and started casually pushing other students aside with relative ease and Ida follow along. It then came to point where Ida and Uraraka were only around 2 meters away from each other with a 2 or 3 student between them. Ida reached out with his arm. Uraraka was confused. Touch my hand, Ida said. Make me float above everyone else. Uraraka now understood and started reaching for Ida's hand to make him levitate. However, they were a few inches short to touch each other's hands. Oh, for the love off! Alexander thought, irritated, and pushed aside more students, so Ida could reach Uraraka. After Ida's hand made contact with Uraraka's, he started to levitate thanks to her quirk, and then Ida jumped up above the students and started using his quirk engine to boost himself over to above the exit door. He spun around in circles a few times because of the lack of gravity and his propelled legs, but he managed to crash land right where he wanted. Ida grabbed a pipe so he could hold himself in place. This is it. Be precise, clear and confident, Ida thought before opening his mouth. Listen up, everything is okay. His voice boomed over the exit hall, and the panicking students stopped dead in their tracks. It's just the media outside. There is absolutely nothing to worry about. Everything is fine. We are students. We need to remain calm and prove we are the best of the best. Ida words managed to calm down the frantic mob of students, and right after police sirens could be heard getting near the school. Outside with Aizawa, Present Mike, and the press. That's rap. Get these vultures out of our station, Present Mike shouted to ever so valiant police officers coming to save the day. The police managed to get the unruly group out of without incident, and they also left the scene right after everything was back in order. Minutes later, back in Class 1A. The newly elected class rep and deputy, Midoriya and Yaoyorozu, was about to give the first speech. Okay, so we need to figure out who the other class officers are, Midoriya said, and yet again nervous beyond belief. But he also had something to say. But first, there is something I want to say. I thought a lot about this. I think Tina Ida should be our class rep, he said, making the entire class listen carefully. He was able to catch everyone's attention and get us in line. So, I believe he should be the one leading our class from now on, he said, surprising Ida also. Yeah, you know what? Kirishima started saying. If Midoriya vouches for him, I am good. Plus, he was a big help. He totally manned up and took charge, right? Students started happily agreeing around the class that Ida was the better choice. This is a waste of time, Mr. Aizawa complained. I don't care who the rep is, just hurry up, he said while back in his sleeping bag. Ida rose from his chair. If Midoriya is nominating me for this job, then I humbly accept, he said while throwing his arm in the air as a disciplined gesture. I pledge to carry out the duties of class rep to the fullest. Sounds good, Ida, Alexander said, and Kikuchi agreed with a nod from the back of the class. Meanwhile, outside at the gate two teachers and the principal were looking at the destroyed gate. The press were most likely not the culprit from what they believed. But who then? And was this a show of power or declaration of war? Later that day, back in Class 1A's room. Today's training is going to be a little different. Mr. Aizawa said, you'll have 3 instructors. Me, All Might, and another faculty member will be keeping tabs on you. 3 pros? Some thought. Was it because of the break-in? Zero shot his hand up. Sir, what kind of training is this? He asked. Aizawa then pulled up a card and held it for the class to see. It read rescue training. You will be dealing with natural disasters and stuff like that, he explained. The class got excited. Everyone started talking about how to use their quirks for this test. Guys, I am not finished yet, Aizawa said and caught their attention again. What you wear is up to you. I know you are excited about costumes. He then pressed the button on a remote and the costume storage compartments came out of the wall. Keep in mind you haven't gotten used to them yet, and they might limit your abilities. I have practically been sleeping in my coat for years. Does that count? Alexander thought sarcastically. Aizawa continued. This training takes place in an off-campus facility, so we will be taking a bus to there. That's all, start getting ready, he said, walked out to get their bus ready. A few minutes later on the bus. The bus's open layout ruined my boarding strategy, Ida said, feeling down. Now that he was class rep, he was already in full swing, so to say. Also, to note was that Midoriya was in his outdoor outfit since his real costume was torn to pieces. Ida, you really need to chill, Ashido sympathetically told him. If we are pointing out the obvious, then there is something I want to say, Asui said and turned to Midoriya, who was sitting right next to her. About you actually. Midoriya was surprised. About me? What is it, Asui? I told you to call me Tsu, she said. Oh yeah, right, Midoriya, a little embarrassed. That power of yours, Asui said. Isn't it a lot like All Might's? Midoriya was startled and began sweat dropping. What really? He wanted the subject to change immediately. You think so, huh? I never really thought about that. Wait, hold on a sec, Kirishima said to Asui. You forget All Might doesn't hurt himself. That makes a huge difference. He said, probably saving Midoriya's hide for now. Still, I bet it's cool to have a simple augmenting type quirk. You can do a lot of flashy stuff with it. My hardening is super strong and can destroy bad guys and stuff, but it doesn't look that impressive, he said while hardening the skin on his arm. Oh no way, I think it's really awesome looking, Midoriya told him. You are definitely pro material. You really think so? Kirishima asked. Seems I'd be a popular hero if I had something flashier. Ashido jumped in on the conversation. Oh, wait a minute, she said and turned Alexander, who was sitting in the seat next her, but it was facing the same way as the bus. Hey Alexander, you have an argumentation quirk, right? Like what you did first day of school and entrance exam. Alexander responded. Oh, yeah, that's right. He did not in fact have a quirk. It was just that easy to fool ordinary people by saying he had. Oh yeah, that's right, Kirishima said, a little embarrassed over how he forgot that super kick Alexander did. Hey Alexander, would say your quick is like more Midoriya or All Might's? Oh, mine is something completely else, Alexander answered honestly, but he had to lie now to keep the story Darte had provided. Rikido Sato, who was sitting next Midoriya, also had a thing to ask. So, but what exactly is your quirk? Now was the time to see if he could remember the fake information Darte had given him. My quirk is called MSTR Rouge, and for it does is something you are going to have to see when we start this whole rescue thing. Next was Asui's turn to ask, so why do you use a sword anyway, and how did you get a hold of it? I figured why not pick up the sword, and for how I got it, it's a gift from old friend. It's called Uprising, Alexander told them. His sword Uprising was made by Darte's R&D team, and in his opinion the best thing they ever made. He had used the thing for years and had slayed many demons with it. Yaoyorozu was the next to ask something. So, from what I gather, you are well versed in our language. How long have you been studying? A year? 2 years? 4 months, Alexander replied casually. The class was taken back, especially Yaoyorozu. 4 months? Yep, Alexander confirmed. Remarkable, Ida added. However, the conversation then turned when white-haired girl Kikuchi changed the subject. Hey Kirishima, you and I have defensive type quirks. I bet if we team up we could come up with some killer combos. Huh, that doesn't sound bad at all, Kirishima yelled. Well, if anything else has to be said, there are definitely a big portion in our class with a pro quirks, Kirishima said. Bakugo and Todoroki have good ones too. Sure, but Bakugo is always angry, so he is not that popular, Asui said, and Bakugo did not like getting told. What did you say? He shouted at her. I'll kick your butt. Rage was natural for the explosive boy if one couldn't tell. You know, we basically just met you. So, it's kind of telling that we all know your personality is flaming CRP mixed garbage, Kaminari told him with a grin, without so much as thinking on how Bakugo would hurt him. You are going to regret the day you applied to this school, you little loser, Bakugo shouted back. Midoriya could not believe what he was hearing. Now Kachin was the one getting teased instead of him. It was weird. Hey, we are here, Aizawa said, and the bus had arrived at the location. The location they were now at was a huge dome structure. When they came to the entrance, were greeted by someone wearing astronaut outfit with big visor. Hello everyone. I've been waiting for you. It was the Space Hero 13, a hero that was an expert at rescuing people. The class stared in awe at 13's presence. 13 is one of my favorite heroes, you're a Rocka fangirl. Come, can't wait to show you all what is inside, 13 said, bidding them welcome to the dome. This was going to be awesome, they all thought. Once inside class, Wana was awestruck again by the size and look of the domes inside. There were mountains, 2 smaller dome, destroyed buildings, a big lake, and lastly trees stretching all over the place. It was like a miniature gathering of place into an amusement park. I created this training facility to prepare you to deal with every type of disasters, 13 explained with pride. I call it the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, but you can call it USJA. The class was a little taken back on how it had the same acronym as Universal Studios Japan. Mr. Aizawa walked over to 13. "Hey, should All Might be here already?" he asked his fellow colleague. "Let me guess, he booked an interview instead," he joked. 13 then said to Aizawa, "Actually, it is something else." 13 the raised 3 fingers. Apparently, he did too much hero work on the way to school this morning and used up all his power. He is resting the teacher's lounge. "That man is the height of irresponsibility," Aizawa said. "Oh well, there were still 13 and himself, so it should be okay. Clock is ticking. We should get started," he told his class. "Excellent," 13 said. "Before we begin, let me explain one thing. Oh well, maybe 2 things, 3. "We get it," the class said, eager to get on with it. "All right, listen carefully," 13 said. "I am sure that you are aware that I have a powerful quirk. It called black hole. I can use to SCK up anything and turn it into dust." "Yeah, you have used black hole to save countless people from disasters before," Midoriya happily said. "That's true. But my quirk could very easily be used to kill," 13 said, turning down the hype for the class. "So, if you also have power that can be dangerous." "Basically all my moves kills now that I think about it," Alexander thought. "In our superhuman society, all quirks are certified and strictly regulated," 13 continued. "So, we often overlook how dangerous it can actually be. Please don't forget that if you lose focus or make the wrong move, your powers can be deadly, even if you are trying to do something virtues like saving someone. Thanks to Aizawa's fitness test, you have solid idea of your quirk's potential. And because of All Might's combat training, you likely experience how dangerous your powers can be when used against other people. Carry those lessons over to this class. Today you're going to learn how to save people's lives. You won't use your power to attack enemies or each other, only to help. After all, that's what a hero is all about. Ensuring the safety of others. That's all I have to say, thank you listening." 13 then got a round of applause from the students. "Right now that is over," Aizawa said. However, he was cut short as the lights traveling around the dome's ceiling were shutting off. The students were wondering what was going on. Alexander noticed something out of the corner of his eye and looked to water fountain meters away from the end of the staircase. He looked down to see a small purple black hole portal. Whoever it was, they clearly not a part of the training. "Mr. Aizawa, near the fountain," he said to the teacher. Mr. Aizawa turned around quick and wide-eyed at the sight of the black portal. He then saw a hand was coming through, and then after a white-haired man covered in hands stepped out of the portal. "Stay together and don't move," he ordered the students. He then turned to his co-worker. 13 protect the students. Finally, one of the students besides Alexander noticed the black portal. It was Kirishima. "What is that thing?" he asked out loud, and the other student followed suit thereafter. "Has the training started already?" Kirishima asked curiously. Some student tried to look closer, but Aizawa yelled, "Stay back," at them. Those are real villains. The class never expected to fight villains today. Some of the students were shaking in fear of the reality that villains had infiltrated USJ and they were right next to them. They looked into the eyes of the villains and pure evil was staring back. Down at the water fountain, the final member of the villain group stepped out, and he was a big, large, muscled dark monster with an exposed brain and head formed like a lizard or a deformed bird. It was dead silent for a whole minute. "PHFF, ahaha." The students, still a little afraid, turned to see their comrade Alexander bursting into an uncontrollable laughter as he was holding on to his main body as he did so. "Who the heck are these guys? They look like they belong in a circus. Haha." All his fellow student began sweat dropping. Was he seriously not taking this seriously? Villain had infiltrated you, and he is only making them angrier. Yellow eyes formed from the dark misty portal. "The only real heroes I see are 13 and Eraserhead." A voice came from the dark mist. "According to the files from UA, All Might should hear as well." Aizawa put 2 and 2 together. So, you used the press as cover and sneaked on to campus. However, the white-haired leader with hands all over ignored him. Where is he? I went through the trouble of gathering so many friends who are eager to meet him. They want All Might, the great symbol of peace. Maybe if I kill a few kids he will come out to play. Aizawa would have none of it, and his scarves started swirling round his being. They students were about to have their first confrontations with real villains. The villains were slowly walking towards the big staircase that led to the entrance. Real villains? No way, Kirishima said. How can so many of them get into a facility this secure? Yayurazu came forth. Yeah, 13, why aren't alarms not going off? She asked the astronaut hero. Good question. I am not sure. 13 replied. Is the entire campus under attack, or is this their only target? Todoroki said out loud. Either way, if the alarm sensors aren't being triggered, then one of these villains must have a quirk that masks their presence here. They carefully chose this isolated facility as an entry point at a time when a class was being taught. They are fools for trespassing here, but they thought this out. Whatever their plan is, they must have a concrete objective in mind. But what is it? He said, scaring the already scared students. 13, get them out of here and alert the main campus. Actually, you know they might be jamming our regular communications too. Kaminari, try using your quirk to contact the school, Mr. Aizawa said. Yes, sir, Kaminari said. What are you gonna do? Midoriya yelled. You can't fight them on your own. There is too many of them. Even if you can nullify their quirks, your fighting styles is not suited for this. Your power works best in stealth and one-on-one fights. That's gonna help in a group, he said with the taste of despair on his forming in his mouth. But Alexander then said, after his laughing trip, Midoriya, you think too little of our teacher. His tone was a bit more optimistic. Midoriya and the rest of the class were a little puzzled at his statement. Huh? What do you mean? Midoriya asked anxiously. Mr. Aizawa, you're going to give us a demo on fighting against the odds, right? Alexander asked his teacher. Something like that, Aizawa said while putting his goggles on. You can't be a pro hero if you only know one trick. The class wasn't accepting that, nor what was going to happen in a minute. I leave it to you, 13. 13 nodded, and Aizawa jumped down the big staircase. 3 villains were standing right where Mr. Aizawa was about land. The first was wearing a big metal helmet and had firearm muzzles on all his fingertips. Shooting squad, take aim, he said to his comrades. Number 2 was female with long gray dreadlocks. She could move at will. Wasn't only going to be All Might and 13 out here? Who is this? She asked. Don't recognizes him, the last guy said. He was big and dressed in gray-green suit stitched together. He was also wearing a gas mask that resembled that of a bull, pig, or a warthog. But if he thinks he can take us down easy, he is dead. The 3 villains readied to attack Mr. Aizawa, but he had way to stop them. Mr. Aizawa used his erasing quirk and made them non-functioning. My quirk. Where are my bullets? Aizawa then used his metal scarves and wrapped them around the 3 villains at the same time, slammed together like ragdolls. The other villains were really surprised, and it made them feel uncomfortable. Next few minutes was just Aizawa kicking villains all over the place by careful anticipating their attack patterns and weaknesses. That was the reason why he was pro-hero. Back on top of the staircase, all the students were running towards the exit trying to leave Astya. Midoriya and Alexander were the only 2 still standing at the edge, watching their teacher wreak 'em all. Wow, he is holding them off. I guess I shouldn't have underestimated him, Midoriya said awed. Not bad at all, Alexander said. Aizawa, not necessarily a strong person, but he was skilled enough to wipe the floor with the so-called villains. Ida interrupted their conversation. This is not the time to be analyzing or getting excited. We have to go. Right? Midoriya said, and him and Alexander went with Ida and the rest. Yet when the class was nearing the door, suddenly the dark misty guy appeared and blocked their path. There is no escape, the dark mist man said. Mr. Aizawa noticed and tried to go back and help, but he was surrounded by more villains, also blocking his path. The mist man said to Class 1A and 13, It's a pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, But we decided to invite ourselves into this haven of justice to say hello. And besides, isn't this a fitting place for the symbol of peace, All Might to take his last breath? He said, explaining their intent for intruding. So that's their plan, Midoriya thought. The Mist Man continued. Wasn't he supposed to be here today, and yet I see no sign of him. There must have been some sort of change in plans that we did count for. Oh well, in the end, I suppose it does not matter. I still have a role to play. While he was talking, 13 readied for a black hole attack with one finger. However, before 13 could attack Bakugo, and Kirishima foolishly attacked the Mistman. It caused explosion that obscured the rest of the class view for a hot minute. Did you think we just going to stand around and let you tear this place to shreds? Kirishima mocked the villain. You are just fancy talk, nothing but waste. Bakugo taunted in his supposed easy victory. Bakugo, Kirishima, get away from there, Alexander shouted to them. Both turned around confused. Huh? Why? Kirishima asked. Your attacks have no effect on mist idiots, Alexander shouted back. He had dealt with enemies who worked similarly before. True enough, the smoke dissipated, and it revealed much to Bakugo and Kirishima's shock. The villain was not fazed by their attack like Alexander had told them. You should listen to your friend. He is clearly better at asserting the situation than you two, though your power does live up to your school's reputation. But you should be more careful, children. Otherwise, someone might get hurt. The Mistman villain said. 13 aimed the black hole finger at the villain. You two get out of the way right now, 13 told Bakugo and Kirishima. But it was too late. The Mistman already had a plan. Dozens of dark purple mist arms were thrown out of him and circled around the students. Now scatter across this facility to meet my comrades and your death. Was the mist swirled around the student? Many were absorbed by it, disappearing into the dark, while others managed to not get touched by the arms and was not moving an inch. Midoriya was then soon also absorbed into the dark, and he was transported into the artificial lake in the dome. He landed in the water and was then attacked by an odd-looking villain with a water quirk. Meanwhile, Alexander was then shallowed by the mist and sent to another place. The smoke slowly dissipated, a place where it was supposed to simulate when a grand fire had spread in an urban area. However, Alexander was transported there while up in the air, so when the mist had fully dissipated, he fell. When Alexander fell, he did not land on the ground, rather he was transported directly above a lot of destroyed debris, and so he got impaled metal rods and beams. BLD ran down the metal until it formed a puddle of BLD beneath Alexander as he was hanging and bleeding from the metal rods and beams. Alright, this is rather annoying, Alexander thought. For a normal human, a body pierced several places, all going through vital organs. It would in no doubt be instant death. However, Alexander was not technically a full human. His demonic heritage from his father's side had granted him many abilities that would far surpass human limits. This was one of them, his incredible durability. This was not the first time that the son of Kain had been impaled, and it won't most certainly be the last. After hanging for a few seconds, the young half-demon checked as best he could to tell where he was impaled. From what he could tell, he was stuck his left arm, 2 going through each of his legs, 1 going through his back and continued until the other side came out of his stomach, and lastly a big one coming through his chest. Alexander quickly noticed that his right arm was in fact not impaled. Suddenly had an idea and tried to grab his sword from his back. He managed to do so, and then afterwards he managed to free himself little by little. After freeing himself, Alexander, he pulled out the last metal rod that was stabbed into and got to his feet and started looking around. After a moment, he believed he could hear banter coming from not too far and decided to head in that direction. Meanwhile, at the landslide zone. So, the plan was to scatter us and then kill us. In that zone, it was as the said simulate a city taken by a landslide. The of smoke had transported students and villains there as well as other places too. Here the students that were transported were Todoroki and Kikuchi. When they first landed, they were immediately attacked by villains. Before Kikuchi had time to ready herself, Todoroki had used his powers of ice to effectively freeze all the villains, making them unable to move. You were wholly unprepared. In fact, to me it looks like you had no training. You don't have the slightest idea on how to use your quirks. Todoroki said. Behind him on the ground was Kikuchi, comprehending what Todoroki had done. His attack was so fast and precise that she was a bit taken back. It looked like he never even attacked, just the ice spread out fast and immobilizing the villains. A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Still, it was quite something. This power, he froze us the instant we warped here? He is not a kid, he is a monster. So cold. The villains said, terrified by the power of the quirk the kid wielded. Todoroki turned his head over his shoulder. You all right, Kikuchi? He asked, but his tone sounded cold to her at the same time. Kikuchi got to her feet and dusted off dirt. Yeah, I am fine. Todoroki then proceeded to walk down between the frozen villains, since they were not able to move at all. While walking, he was trying to figure out how the villains planned on killing the symbol of peace. At first, he thought they had gathered a force of elite criminals to deal with him, but seeing them now, that stance was losing its value fast. Kikuchi then noticed something suddenly move. In the brief moment she saw it was another villain going in for a strike. She tried to alert Todoroki. Todoroki, behind you, she yelled. The villain tried to strike at him spear weapon, but Todoroki quickly reacted by turning around and grabbing the spear and freezing it, and the villain holding it. I didn't think he was this fast. Kikuchi thought, surprised over how fast Todoroki reacted. Todoroki continued to think. He suspected that only about 5 of all the villains were actually dangerous. He needed more information fast. He then told the frozen villains, listen well. If you stay frozen, your cells will slowly die and your bodies succumbs to frostbite and hypothermia. Luckily for you, I want to be hero, so I would like to avoid any unnecessary cruelty. But I can only do that if you tell on how you plan to kill All Might. Todoroki said, raising a hand with frost falling from it, and place it in front of a villain whose face was terrified. But before Todoroki leaned in closer, Kikuchi suddenly came and grabbed his arm. Stop that, Todoroki. Todoroki discharged his ice. What are you doing? I was interrogating them. You call that interrogating? More like torture to me. A hero isn't supposed to stoop so low. Kikuchi frowned. I wasn't actually going to harm, just scaring them. But now they know that. Todoroki countered. To him, she had just ruined his chance on getting information about the enemy. Oh sure, yeah. Just scaring them, huh? I wonder what if you go further, instead only scaring them. Maybe you'll kill a man who can't defend himself on accident. Kikuchi said sarcastically. What was she talking about? Why was she suddenly acting like this? Todoroki thought. I don't know what's wrong with you, but we need to get them to talk now, he said, charging his hand again with frost, which made the villains scared again. Kikuchi then stepped between Todoroki and the villain. I won't let you. Let me talk to them first, she said. Todoroki was about to tell her to move aside, but then he saw something unexpected. One of Kikuchi's eyes was blinking and taking long blinks, like a signal. Wait, does she have a plan? Todoroki thought. He decided to play along. He wanted to see what she had planned. Fine, I give 2 minutes. When time's up, I'll do my thing, he said, discharging his frost again. Kikuchi then turned around to face the villain. Okay, please listen. I can't guarantee my friend won't hurt you bad if you don't talk. So, if you want to come out in one piece, please tell us everything. She tone is sympathetic. Now I see what she is doing, Todoroki thought, realizing her plan through her acting. The terrified villain talked after heavy thinking. All right, I'll tell you everything. Just don't let him get closer to me again. I'll do my best, I promise, Kikuchi said and placed a hand on her chest. After getting the info, Kikuchi and Todoroki stepped away from villains. That was smart. The classic good cop and bad cop trick. You acted so you would seem like the good cop while I became the bad cop unintendedly. You pretended to nice to make them think you were helping them from me. Todoroki stated. I'm glad you trusted me. I admit I thought I was going to mess it up somehow. Kikuchi confessed. Honestly, she saw the opportunity and took without thinking. Anyway, what do we do now? Todoroki looked in a different direction and thought for a sec before saying, we should head back to the entrance. There we can better determine how we should engage the main villains. Huh? What, don't tell me you are planning on fighting them, Kikuchi voiced. Are you acting again? Todoroki asked. No, I agree we should head back. We are newbies. Leave the major villains to the pros when they come, Kikuchi said. Weren't you listen? Their plan was to get All Might here and kill him with that Namu thing. We can't let it get close to him, Todoroki said. And you think you can do it? Kikuchi asked. Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't matter. We can't let the symbol of peace get killed. No telling what would happen if All Might dies, Todoroki said. Todoroki, I know you are powerful, but we are still heroes in training. Plus, All Might wouldn't reckless enough to come alone. As soon as you knows something is wrong, they would send someone to check up on us. That's not necessarily the case. They cut our communications to make sure that they are not alerted, and they have spent a lot of time thinking this through. But since All Might is not here, their plan has failed, but there is a high chance they would get angry and start killing us the students since they couldn't get All Might. And by that alone, we should still go back and meet up with others, form a counterattack, Todoroki explained. Todoroki, that's still way too crazy. We need to, Kikuchi was yelling and doing arm gestures while talking when she suddenly hit something right next to her. A feminine voice sounded. Oh. Todoroki and Kikuchi's faces suddenly became dumbfounded. Did Kikuchi hit someone, but no one was there? That hurt Kikuchi. Watch where you swing your arms. It suddenly hit them both. It was the invisible girl in their class. H-Cure? Kikuchi asked. Yeah, it's me, H-Cure's voice confirmed. You have been here the entire time? Todoroki asked. Yeah, and luckily I managed to not get hit by your ice, Todoroki. H-Cure touched the place where Kikuchi accidentally hit her. Arg, that really hurt. Kikuchi stammered. Oh, Hagakure, I am so sorry, I didn't see you there, I wasn't not really sure how to respond to a person who was, well, not seeable. Todoroki then turned around and started walking. We should head for the entrance. Come or don't. If not, find a safe place to hide. Hey, don't leave us here, Kikuchi said, and her and Hagakure followed. Moments earlier, back in the fire zone, Ojiro was not liking the odds. He was all alone dressed in his gi in the fire zone against a multitude of villains coming closer, and the heat from the flames were getting to him soon. One of the villains walked forward. This villain had a big stomach, however a big mouth with sharp teeth was placed on it. What's the matter, hero? Can't handle the heat? The villain taunted. I'll have you know that I am not afraid. And you, won't stand for this, Ojiro said. Oh, you are not afraid, are you? I'll remember that when I throw you into the fire of this oversized oven, the villain said, getting laughs from his comrades around him. The villains walked closer, was about to attack. Okay boys, G. But then out of the corner rock came flying and hit the big villain right in the face, sending him to ground. This startled the other henchmen that were present. Ojiro stood wondering who just threw that rock when. Yo Ojiro, you sweating in here? A voice came from his side. He turned to see Alexander come walking casually over to him, not worrying about the villains, sword swung over his shoulder. Because I am, with all this heat. Alexander, you are here too? Ojiro asked. Yeah, but I landed a little further back. Took me some time to get here, Alexander told him, and was now right next to Ojiro. Hey, who the hell are you? One of the villains asked in anger. Me? I am another you, a student if you haven't figured that out, Alexander said. So, I saw you were ganging up on my classmate, and I decided that 2 against all of you was a bit fairer. Well, you are going to get killed along with your friend now, right Daisuke? The villain grunt got no answer from his big comrade, but when he looked over, he saw that his villainous friend had been knocked by the rock that the sword-wielding teen threw. What the? Alexander managed to knock out a villain already, and with such ease. If I didn't know better, I would say that Alexander could have cleaved the head of the big one, by accident with that rock throw, Ojiro thought. Alexander turned to Ojiro. Hey Ojiro, you practice martial arts, right? Huh? Yeah, I am martial artist. Why? Ojiro curiously asked. Cool, let's show these blockheads what you can do, Alexander said in assertive tone and placed his sword on his back. Wait, do you mean me? Ojiro stammered in surprise. Well, obviously, I want you to fight the main group while I got your back. I've been wondering how you use that extra limb of yours, Alexander said. Ojiro was about to protest. It was clear that Alexander was the better fighter of the two, so he should fight them head-on. Was Alexander risking Ojiro's life just to see well he would fare? "Get 'em, lads," the villain from before shouted to the rest, and they charged. Alexander had a plan of engagement in mind. "Ojiro, you go in, and I'll back you up if anyone tries to take you from behind." "Oh, okay," Ojiro responded. Now it was too late to say no, so he went in to fight anyway. Ojiro jumped and side-swiped with his tail, taking out 2 grunts, and almost immediately one went to attack his back, but was interrupted by Alexander, who grabbed the grunt's shoulder and turned him and punched lightly in the face, knocking out the grunt villain. Another went for Ojiro, but this one had long thorns sticking out of his left arm. The enemy swung his arm at Ojiro but managed to dodge. Ojiro needed to get a good hit, so he kicked the ankle on the villain, making him bend over in pain. And with villain now lowered, Ojiro promptly kicked him in head, knocking him out. These grunts are barely anything, Ojiro thought. Why did they think they could get away with attacking you? If they were this bad, that teenager could kick them into SPMSN. Meanwhile, with Alexander, he just waited casually with a cheeky expression for 2 other enemies to come closer. "Don't you give us that look," one of them hatefully shouted. The 2 got close enough, so they charged in with one right arm hook and the other a left arm hook. But Alexander coolly blocked both attacks and then grabbed their heads and smacked them together, making them both unconscious. If there was one rule Dante held above all else, it was killing humans was not allowed unless in defense and last resort. Last enemy went after Ojiro. He was bigger than all the enemies before. Maybe he was one of the real threats the villains brought. He had hands that suddenly transformed into solid metal, and he tried punch Ojiro. Ojiro carefully dodged the incoming attacks by stepping backwards with each strike. However, he was getting corner up against a wall and needed to attack soon, or else he was going to be meat punching bag. The enemy readied a heavy punch that would kill Ojiro. Ojiro ducked at the last second, and seeing the opportunity, he punches the crouch of the villain, who in turn bent over in agony. Ojiro then used his tail propel himself up and uppercut the enemy. But the villain was not down yet. Ojiro came in and struck the villain several more times before the villain finally fell over from exhaustion. Ojiro was also tired and was gasping for air. Not bad, Ojiro." Alexander came over and said. Ojiro's breathing returned to normal. "Thanks, and also thank for your assistance, Alexander. But next time you are first." Perhaps very slightly hit of resentment could be heard in his voice. "No prob, it's only fair. But I think you would be able to take out on your own. These guys are really weak, and dress more weirdly." Alexander stated, and Ojiro couldn't help but agree. "Yes, except for this one, they were all pretty much pushovers," Ojiro said. He put his right hand on his chin to think. They risked a lot to get here, and their plan was to kill All Might. Just how do they plan on accomplishing it? "How about we check with one of these villains and see what he knows?" Alexander suggested. "Yes, that makes sense. Which one should we interrogate?" Ojiro asked. Just then they both heard one of the villain grunts groan as he woke up. "Probably the one that's already waking up," Alexander said. The big villain that had the mouth belly quirk was waking up after getting knocked out by that rock Alexander threw at him. He slowly opened his eyes to see the 2 students watching over him. "You are awake," Ojiro stated. The villain then said, "Hey, what do you think you are doing?" he shouted at them. The villain opened his mouth belly that had large sharp teeth, but Alexander nonchalantly shut the mouth shut by grabbing both lips of the mouth belly in one swift motion. This horrified the villain and his face went pale. "Yeah, I wouldn't do that if I was you," Alexander said while holding the belly mouth closed easily. Alexander's reaction was quick, Ojiro thought. "So?" Alexander began questioning the villain. "How do you plan to kill All Might?" Without Ojiro noticing, Alexander had his eyes glow menacingly red and made the villain terrified. Ojiro was dumbfounded to then see the villain suddenly busted into tears and started crying. "I am sorry, please don't hurt me," the villain cried out. Ojiro was completely baffled to see this oh-so-evil bad guy reduced to a wailing adult. "This guy is total crybaby," he whispered to Alexander. Alexander whispered, "Yeah, I know." They then went back to interrogating the villain. "Look, we will not harm if you tell us exactly what we want to know. How do you villains plan on killing All Might?" "All right, We planned on using Namu. Just don't hurt me, he screamed. Namu? Alexander asked. Yes, it's the big scary dark monster man that traveled with us, Villain explained. I don't know the right details, but apparently the big shots amped him up to specifically fight All Might. And man, he scares the soul out of me. What do you mean by amped up? How? Ojiro asked. I don't know how, but apparently he has been amped with quirks. The villain told them. Wait, did you say quirks? As in more than one? Alexander asked. Great, now they had to deal with this CRP. Despite his eyes weren't glowing anymore, the villain was still frightened. I swear that's all I know, he pleaded. Can you please let me go? He asked them. Sorry, you did help in attacking you, a members and personal. I am afraid you are not going anywhere, besides with the police when they get here. Alexander informed him. And also, one last thing. What's that? The villain stammered. We lied when we said we weren't going to hurt you. Alexander smiled. What? The villain stammered in terror. Alexander turned to his classmate. You want the honor? I'll take it, Ojiro said, and then kicked the villain in the head, knocking him out cold like all his friends. Again. Alexander stood up. So, that dark monster is their plan, Namu, he said. From he knew the big thing was not a demon since his amulet did not glow when it first arrived, meaning the DMN thing was human or something else. Killing All Might with being powered by multiple quirks. Is that even possible? To have more than one or two? I know Todoroki has two, but his is more of a combination of two other quirks, Ojiro said. I have no idea. I didn't see indication of him being so strong he could take on All Might when I saw, but I could be totally wrong. Appearances can be deceiving, Alexander said. Sure, the Namu thing had big muscles, but who was to say those weren't just for show? His job as a devil hunter had taught him that much. Ojiro then said, Okay, anyway, what's our next move? I think should see if we can't find the others. They were transported away like us, I think, Alexander said. Makes sense. How shall we go about it? Ojiro asked. How about you go out the back to see if the back door works? Meanwhile, I will go out the front door and knock out villains while I look for our guys that way. Alexander proposed a plan. Ojiro agreed. Okay, I'll find out if there is a back door. This place is getting too hot for me anyway. Good luck, Alexander, he said and ran in a direction. Alexander then proceeded to walk over to the front entrance. Meanwhile, with Midoriya, him, Sue, and Maita, who were also transported to the fake lake, had managed to deal with the aqua-based villains in the lake zone, but now they were right next to the main leader, and the monstrous being Namu was onto holding their teacher Azewa and was slowly killing him. When the main leader with the hands over his body noticed them, he went kill them. Seeing he was going after Sue first, Midoriya charged one for all and punched at the villain. When he made that punch, it turned out that his quirk had not wrecked his body like before and thought he had taken care of the villain. But Joy's smile turned to dust when the smoke dissipated and reveled the Namu was now in front of him instead of the villain that was grabbing Sue. But how? How did it move so fast? Are you one of All Might's disciples? The white-haired villain with the hands covering his body. I guess it does not matter. I am done with you now. The big monster then grabbed on to Midoriya's arm and was about to attack him, while Sue tried to save him, but the white-haired then went after her while Maito was looking on in horror. However, the door to Usti suddenly exploded open. The force from the explosion shook the area around the door, and a dust cloud gathered within its vicinity. Footsteps soon echoed, and the students at the entrance breathed a sign of great relief and hope once they saw who it was. Have no fear, students. It was All Might. He had come to save them. I am here. And he looked PSS. I could shake the feeling something wrong here as 13. And Aizawa didn't answer my calls. So, I hurried over running into young Ida on the way. He told me of the villainy at work here. The symbol of peace was ready to throw down. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Speckters on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.